Chapter 1760. Yun Yao's reverse water divine sword was definitely a divine weapon for digging ore veins. Even if the golden crow copper ore was incomparably sturdy, she could still use the divine sword to easily dig it out from the ground. Everyone worked for a full 2 hours before they dug out the 1,000-foot-long ore vein. Unfortunately, the ore vein was no longer complete. It had been damaged by the Xitigarbha divine armor and broken into several pieces. Tianxing kept a portion of the golden crow copper ore and put it into his spatial ring. He put the remaining pieces of the ore vein into the sword world and let the people of the Earth Spirit clan bury the ore vein underground. After doing all this, everyone left the underground and flew back into the air. Tianxing said with a gratified expression, "Although the process was somewhat dangerous and difficult, we worked together. Not only did we get through the difficulties, but we also got such a rich harvest. Everyone, let's find a place to rest for a while. After recovering our magic power, we will continue forward." After saying that, he brought Yun Yao, Zibai, and Shohei and landed on a pale golden mountain peak. Yun Yao used the power of the reverse water divine sword to set up a small formation to resist the power of the colored glass heavenly fire. Everyone stayed in the light barrier of the formation, took pills, sat down, and circulated their energy to adjust their breathing. However, just as everyone sat down and before they could start cultivating, a sinister sneer sounded in the sky. You 4 little guys are really stupid and ridiculous. Encountering little fat sheep like you, if I don't take advantage of you, I won't be able to live with myself." This was the voice of a middle-aged man. His voice was sharp and ear-piercing, and it was so cold that it made people feel very uncomfortable. Tianxing, Yun Yao, and the others immediately looked up at the sky. They saw a middle-aged man wearing a black robe and holding a black feather fan in the sky 1,000 feet away. This person had a thin figure and wore a loose black robe, revealing a pale and narrow face. There were 2 mysterious tattoos on his cheeks, and a black spider pattern was imprinted on his forehead. His long hair was also wriggling. Upon closer inspection, one would discover that his thick shoulder-length hair was actually made up of countless thin black snakes. This person's entire body was emitting a dense evil aura. His sinister appearance caused people to feel fear in their hearts. Moreover, his strength had far surpassed Zibai and Shohei, and he'd attained the 6th level of the Tribulation Realm. Tianxing looked at him for a while and frowned. He secretly sent a voice transmission to Yun Yao and the other 2. "This guy is obviously an evil man. He doesn't have good intentions. Everyone be careful." Yun Yao nodded to show that she understood. Zibai and Shohei immediately dispersed and used their concealment techniques to hide in the sea of fire, ready to attack at any time. The black-robed man looked down at Tianxing and the others, turning a blind eye to the actions of Zibai and Shohei. "Ha, little fellow, don't try to play tricks in front of this monarch and don't even think about resisting. Let me give you a word of advice. Obediently hand over all the treasures you have on you as well as the mine you just dug up." At this point, the black-robed man paused for a moment, and his gaze fell upon the burial of heaven and water reversal. Feeling the aura of the water reversal sword, his pupils immediately constricted, and a thick sense of shock flashed through his eyes. Immediately, his tone was somewhat hurried and his voice was sharp as he shouted coldly, "And your treasured swords, you have to obediently hand them over to this monarch. Otherwise, this monarch will bury you in the sea of fire, and not even your bones will remain." Hearing these 2 sentences, Tianxing and Yun Yao's eyes flashed with cold, killing intent. Tianxing stared at him coldly and asked, "We don't know you, but you want to kill us and rob us. Can be seen that you are an evil beast. However, you dare to rob us alone. I'm afraid that the one who will die is you." The black-robed man immediately laughed mockingly, waving the black feather fan, and said with contempt, "This monarch really didn't see wrongly. You 4 idiots are all inexperienced rookies. In the entire ruins of God, who doesn't know the name of the Black Feather Association? We, the Black Feather Association, don't need a reason or an excuse to rob and kill anyone. Fine, this monarch is merciful and will let you die knowing. This monarch is Yiya, the 2nd in command of the Black Feather Association. Remember, we, the Black Feather Association, will never fight alone." As his voice fell, 9 figures immediately appeared in the sky around the mountain. Swish, 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 swish. 9 Tribulation Realm powerhouses with different appearances and ferocious auras stood in the sea of fire, surrounding the entire mountain. Most of these 9 Tribulation Realm powerhouses had the strength of the 2nd to 4th level of the Tribulation Realm. Among them there was a white-haired old man, a burly man, a middle-aged scholar, and 2 dwarfs with a thick build. However, they all had a common characteristic, which was that their faces were ferocious, and their bodies exuded a bloodthirsty aura. Among them, a burly man in black armor laughed loudly and said, "Second in command, we are still in a hurry to support the Great Master. Let's end this quickly. These little rookies, just treat them as an appetizer. We can easily get rid of them. Why do you have to talk nonsense with them?" The other Tribulation Realm powerhouses also nodded in agreement, revealing ferocious and bloodthirsty sneers. They all took out their magic treasures and weapons, staring at Ji Tianxing and Yun Yao with murderous eyes, and slowly approached them. Yiya, the second in command, waved his black feather fan and said with a smile, "You are a group of boors who only know how to fight and kill. Don't scare these 2 little guys. Especially that little beauty. She is simply an outstanding beauty. She is so beautiful that it makes one's heart itch." Before he finished speaking, the group of Tribulation Realm powerhouses all laughed evilly, revealing an expression of sudden realization. "Second in command, we understand. Don't worry. Second in command, don't be impatient. We will capture that little beauty immediately and send her to you. We want to rob her of her wealth, but we also want to rob her of her beauty. Brothers, what are you waiting for? Let's go together and get rid of them quickly. Don't let the second in command wait anxiously." Everyone shouted a few times and immediately waved their swords and sabers, using their secret techniques to kill Ji Tianxing and Yun Yao. Ji Bai and Shou He were eager to protect their masters. They immediately used their secret sword techniques, stabbing out sword light and saber light that filled the sky, blocking the few Tribulation Realm powerhouses. Ji Tianxing and Yun Yao also immediately took action. They waved their swords and used their secret techniques to block the other party's attacks. Both sides engaged in a fierce battle in the Sea of Fire. They both used their full strength and hundreds of strange techniques, fighting until the sky turned dark. The colorful brilliance of magic power condensed into various kinds of light and shadow, intertwining and colliding in the sky, making deafening sounds. The violent and raging shock waves swept away the Sea of Fire and spread in all directions. Although Ji Tianxing and the other 3 fought back with all their strength, it was difficult for them to fight against the 9 Tribulation Realm powerhouses. They were beaten back and were in danger. Seeing this scene, Yiya stood in the sky calmly, watching the battle with a sneer on his face. In his opinion, Ji Tianxing and the other 3 were bound to die. There was no possibility of survival. Chapter 1761. The 2 sides fought for 100 breaths of time before stopping temporarily. Ji Tianxing, Yun Yao, and the others retreated to the broken mountain peak, forming a defensive circle around each other. Ji Bai and Shou He were both injured. Their bodies were stained with blood and their clothes were tattered and ragged. Ji Tianxing and Yun Yao were also slightly injured. Their robes were stained with blood, and their long hair was draped over their shoulders in a mess. The 1,000-feet mountain peak under their feet was also cracked with dense ravines and half of it collapsed. The bandits of the Black Feather Gang were still scattered in the sky, surrounding Ji Tianxing and the others. However, they also paid a big price. 2 of the bandits were relatively weak. They were seriously injured by Ji Bai and Shou He. Their bodies were on the verge of collapse, so they could only escape first. Of the remaining 7 bandits, 4 of them were also injured and their bodies were dyed red with blood. Seeing this scene, the sneer on Yiya's face disappeared. Holding the black feather fan in his hand, he shouted coldly with a gloomy face, "You pieces of trash, weren't you arrogant just now? Why can't you even deal with 4 rookies?" The brawny man in black armor wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth and said in a dull voice, "Second Master, these 4 guys are not easy to deal with. They can't be underestimated." Another white-haired old man also said in a ruthless tone, "Second Master, the swords of those 2 little beasts don't seem to be ordinary. They are at least saint-level magic treasures." In the battle just now, Ji Tianxing and Yun Yao seemed to be the weakest, but they displayed amazing combat strength. Especially Yun Yao's water-reversed divine sword. It was simply unstoppable and its divine power was matchless. Yiya immediately frowned and shouted angrily with a gloomy expression, "Nonsense! If they didn't have such a precious treasure, why would I stop halfway and waste my time to deal with them? You are so useless, do you want me to do it myself?" The bandits were silent and no one answered. After a while, the black-armored man said in a deep voice, "Second master, give us another chance. If we can't take him down, you'll have to do it yourself." As he spoke, the black-armored man took the lead and rushed towards Zhou Xian. He brandished his crimson broadsword and slashed out a monstrous flame. Zhi Bai immediately rushed forward, waving his mysterious black blade, slashing out 19 dazzling blade lights. His saber technique was as fast as lightning, and each strike was faster than the previous one. The power of each strike overlapped like an endless wave. No matter how ferocious the black-armored man's attacks were, they were unable to break through his defense. The other bandits also used their unique skills and charged toward Zhi Tianxing and Yunyao without any regard for their own safety. 3,000 weak waters. Yunyao shouted with a cold expression. She formed a sword seal with her left hand and waved the divine sword with her right hand, slashing out hundreds of sword lights. Swish, swish, swish. The sword light in the sky formed a sword net that contained the wondrous power of a formation. It turned into a huge vortex that charged toward the bandits. The attacks of the bandits were immediately swallowed by the blue vortex and dissipated. Immediately after, they were also shrouded by the blue vortex and had to endure countless sword lights. They were unable to protect themselves. Zhi Tianxing took the opportunity to use his unique skill. He unleashed his 1,000-feet-tall golden sword essence and slashed it at the white-haired old man. White Tiger Sacred Sword. The golden sword essence burst out with a golden light that soared into the sky, forming a huge white tiger phantom that was as large as a mountain. Its power increased several times. The giant sword fell from the sky and instantly slashed the white-haired old man, sending him flying backward. Puff! While he was still in the air, the white-haired old man spat out blood. His entire left arm was cut off. Seeing this scene, Yiya's face turned extremely ugly and his eyes were incomparably gloomy. He could no longer remain calm. He shook the black feather fan in his hand and unleashed an overwhelming number of black light blades that rushed toward Zhi Tianxing. Soul-rending kill. More than 200 black light blades spun crazily and formed an inescapable net that enveloped Zhi Tianxing, leaving him nowhere to hide. The black light blades contained an extremely powerful force that specialized in destroying the soul. It was very insidious. Zhi Tianxing's heart trembled. He immediately used his unique skill to block Yiya's attack. His body ignited with golden flames and turned into a golden light that merged into the golden sword essence. The Burial of Heaven sword also became 10,000 feet tall and merged with the golden sword essence. Vermilion Bird Sacred Sword. The 10,000 feet tall giant sword erupted with destructive power and slashed toward the black light blades. Kaboom! A loud explosion that shook the 9 heavens erupted and resounded through the sky. The inescapable net formed by the black light blades was shattered on the spot and splashed in all directions. The power of the giant sword essence was also exhausted and became dim as it flew back 10,000 feet long. Swoosh! The Burial of Heaven sword was ejected and Zhi Tianxing was also sent flying. He appeared in the sky with a pale face and spat out 3 mouthfuls of blood in a row. On the surface, he didn't seem to be injured. However, his internal organs had been ruptured and more than a dozen of his meridians had been broken. Most importantly, his soul had suffered a heavy blow and his consciousness had been blurred. Damn Yiya, he must have the strength of a 7th-stage tribulation transcendent stage cultivator. This thought flashed through Zhi Tianxing's mind and his heart was filled with anger and unwillingness. The difference in strength between him and Yiya was too great. Even if he tried his best and used his strongest trump card, he couldn't shake Yiya. On the contrary, Yiya's casual secret technique had seriously injured him. Such a result made him want to retreat. We can't stay here any longer. Otherwise we will all die here. We must find a way to escape. After making up his mind, he hurriedly sent a voice transmission to Yunyao and Zhi Bai to stay in the dark. Then he took out a dark red elixir from his interspatial ring and stuffed it into his mouth. This elixir was called the World Annihilation Elixir. It was a tribulation transcendence elixir personally refined by Hong Qingtian. The elixir's name was very domineering and its effect was also very domineering. After Zhi Tianxing took the World Annihilation Elixir, the elixir quickly dissolved in his body and erupted with endless magic power, causing his body to swell violently. His injuries were temporarily suppressed and his nerves were numb, so he couldn't feel any pain. His combat strength was increasing at an incredible speed. In just a few breaths he had become a 30-meter-tall giant and his combat strength had increased by 5 times. The World Annihilation Elixir's effect can only last for 100 breaths of time. Once the elixir's effect is over, I will collapse and faint. I must escape with everyone during this period of time. Fight with your back to the river. Victory or defeat depends on this. This thought flashed through Ji Tianxing's mind and he hurriedly used his secret technique and rushed toward Yiya without any regard for his own safety. Heaven-splitting sword. He held the sword of burial of heaven with both hands and slashed with all his strength. A 1,000-meter-long golden sword immediately appeared in the sky and slashed toward Yiya with the power to destroy the world. An unlucky bandit happened to be between Ji Tianxing and Yiya and was instantly hit by the giant sword. Bang! With a muffled explosion, the third-stage Tribulation Transcendence Realm bandit was directly smashed into pieces by the giant sword and turned into pieces of flesh and blood that filled the sky. In the next moment, the giant sword arrived in front of Yiya and golden light enveloped his body. Chapter 1762. At the critical moment, Yiya did not hesitate to use a secret technique to block the attack of the giant golden sword. He stretched out his arms and released a soaring black light, which condensed into 4 pairs of wide black wings to protect himself. At the same time, the giant golden sword that was thousands of feet long struck him hard. Bam! With a dull explosion he was sent flying by the giant sword, rolling and crashing into the ruins in the distance. Boom! The mound of ruins that was thousands of feet high was smashed into pieces by him, splashing gravel all over the sky. The 4 pairs of huge black wings were also cracked by the huge sword, and were shattered into pieces along with a cracking sound. However, Yiya's strength was indeed strong. After taking such a heavy blow he was only slightly injured. After crashing into the ruins, black light gushed out of his body and shook the gravel around him away. His figure flashed and rushed out. At this time, Ji Tianxing had already taken Yunyao and Ji Bai to guard the dark. They broke through the encirclement of several bandits and fled as fast as lightning. Yiya shouted in a cold tone and chased after them with a murderous aura. "Kid, you still want to escape? Dream on." In order to snatch Ji Tianxing and Yunyao's treasured swords, he had already lost several capable men. If he could not kill Ji Tianxing and the others smoothly, his loss would be too great. In the blink of an eye, Yiya caught up with Ji Tianxing and the others. He released an overwhelming black light, which formed tens of thousands of ferocious-looking black crows and enveloped them. Wherever the black crows passed, even the colored glass heavenly fire was swept away. Tens of thousands of black crows lined up neatly and formed a huge net, releasing an extremely powerful suppressive force. Yunyao hurriedly waved the water reversal divine sword and slashed out hundreds of sword lights with all her might. Bam 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 bam. The icy blue sword light that was hundreds of feet long slashed at the black crows in the sky, creating an earth-shattering sound. At least thousands of black crows were smashed into pieces by the sword light on the spot. A huge gap was torn in the black net which could not trap Ji Tianxing and the others at all. Swish, swish. With a flash of multicolored light, Ji Tianxing and the others rushed out of the black light net and into the vast sea of fire. Ji Bai and Shohei worked together to cast a secret technique and used the void escape technique. They brought Ji Tianxing and Yunyao and teleported dozens of miles away. Yiya was immediately shaken off. He flew into a rage and led several bandits in a chase. However, the bandits were all injured and flying at a slower speed. There was no way they could catch up. Yiya's speed was the fastest. After 100 breaths of time he was about to catch up with Ji Tianxing and the others. However, Ji Tianxing and his companions had all crawled into the magical equipment space of the reverse water sword. Yunyao controlled the reverse water sword and disappeared into the crimson sea of fire at the speed of light. No matter how strong Yiya was, no matter how good his hunting skills were, it was impossible for him to catch up. A quarter of an hour later he was completely shaken off and lost track of Ji Tianxing and the others. Helplessly he could only give up the chase. Not long after, several bandits rushed over and surrounded him. Seeing his gloomy expression and his soaring anger and killing intent, the bandits were silent and did not dare to speak. They looked trembling with fear. Yiya stared at the depths of the flaming mountain, his eyes flashing with a ferocious cold light. "Damn little bastards, you actually fled into the depths of the flaming mountain. You are courting death. Don't let me find you or I will skin you all and tear you into pieces. Yi cursed with a venomous tone, his heart filled with humiliation and anger. As the second in command of the Black Feather Gang, he had always been able to call the wind and summon the rain and do whatever he wanted. However, he never expected that he would fall in the hands of a few rookies. Not only did he fail to steal the treasure, but he also suffered such heavy losses. This was simply a great humiliation. Yi had to consider how he should explain this to the First Master. In the depths of the Flaming Mountain under a certain mountain range, the 3-feet-long reverse water divine sword had shrunk to the size of an embroidery needle and was hidden in the rock layer underground, motionless. The terrifying glass heavenly fire could not do anything to the reverse water divine sword. Inside the reverse water divine sword, there was a vast magic treasure space. This space was dozens of miles wide like a small world. There was no sun, moon, or stars in the small world, but there was a huge ice-blue water ball hanging in the sky, emitting endless cold light. There was a grassland, a lake, and a tall mountain on the ground. At the top of the mountain, there was also an ice-blue palace built as if it was made of ice. It was magnificent. Ji Tianxing, Yun Yao, Ji Bai, and Shou Hei were all in the palace healing their injuries. Ji Bai and Shou Hei's injuries were slightly lighter, so they were sitting in the main hall recuperating. Ji Tianxing's injuries were the most serious and he was healing in the secret room. Yun Yao sat in front of him, using a secret technique with a solemn expression. She activated the longevity divine power and continuously poured it into his body. Under the nourishment of the longevity divine power, his injuries quickly healed, and the injuries to his meridians and divine soul were also quickly healing. After an entire day, Ji Tianxing's injuries stabilized, and Yun Yao stopped casting. She stayed beside Ji Tianxing silently meditating and recuperating. Half a day later, Ji Tianxing's injuries and magic power were 80% recovered, and he ended his cultivation. Yun Yao opened her eyes and asked with concern, "Tianxing, how do you feel?" Ji Tianxing nodded slightly and said, "It's nothing serious, don't worry." After a pause he asked Yun Yao, "Yao Yao, where are we now?" Yun Yao revealed a helpless look and said bitterly, "I don't know, I was too anxious when I ran away and forgot to remember the route. However, we ran for 200,000 miles in one breath, so we should be in the depths of the Flaming Mountain now." The depths of the Flaming Mountain? Ji Tianxing raised his eyebrows, and the corner of his mouth curled into a meaningful sneer. "I heard them say before that the glazed fire dragon appeared in the depths of the Flaming Mountain, and hundreds of experts have come here, trying to capture the glazed fire dragon. If we are lucky, we should be able to see the legendary glazed fire dragon soon." Yun Yao thought for a moment and shook her head gently. "If we really see the glazed fire dragon, it might not be lucky. It must be very dangerous to be surrounded by hundreds of experts." Ji Tianxing nodded and said, "That's true, but we are weak and it's easy for others to ignore us. As long as we don't run into people from the Black Feather Gang, we should be safe." Black Feather Gang? Yun Yao frowned and thought for a moment and reminded him with a serious face, "Tianxing, I think I heard people from the Black Feather Gang say that they are rushing to support the big boss. It seems that the big boss of the Black Feather Gang must be in the depths of the Flaming Mountain, and is most likely dealing with the glazed fire dragon. We must be extra careful or else we might be discovered by the Black Feather Gang." Ji Tianxing nodded to show that he understood and reminded Yun Yao, "Let's put the glazed fire dragon aside first and ignore it." Chapter 1763. Ji Tianxing had already gathered 3 of the 4 materials needed to repair the burial of heaven. He already had the heavenly fire glazed true gold, yin-yang divine jade, and golden crow copper marrow. He was only missing the wind thunder meteorite. With his previous experience, Ji Tianxing was even more cautious this time. He had Yun Yao put away the reverse water divine sword to prevent its aura from attracting the covetous eyes of experts. The 2 of them flew through the blazing mountain, unhurriedly searching the various peaks and exploring the underground veins. Soon the 2 of them discovered that this area was indeed the depths of the blazing mountain, and it was even more dangerous and terrifying. The sea of fire was even more violent, and the underground veins were even more abundant. At the same time, the various demons and giant beasts hiding underground were also denser and stronger. The 2 of them could only slow down and explore even more carefully. 2 hours later, while the 2 of them were exploring the underground veins, they awakened an ancient mutated beast, the blazing dragon lion. It was a giant beast that was as big as a mountain and had an explosive temperament. It had already undergone 6 heavenly tribulations. The two of them were chased by the blazing dragon lion. After a dozen or so moves in the sea of fire, they quickly retreated. If they fought with all their strength, they could naturally defeat the blazing dragon lion with their trump cards. However, doing so was meaningless. They would not gain any benefits and would even put themselves in danger. If the battle caused too much of a commotion and attracted other demons or experts, their situation would become even more dangerous. Therefore, the two of them chose to retreat and shake off the blazing dragon lion. For the next half a day, the two of them walked through the blazing mountain, exploring the veins even more cautiously. During this process, they encountered several groups of tribulation transcendence experts. These experts came from all over the world. There were famous orthodox sects and also evil sections. Some of them were digging for veins and gems underground, while others were hurrying on as if they were searching for something. However, everyone remained vigilant and guarded against each other. Even if they encountered each other, they would not easily meet each other, let alone have no conflicts. Before they knew it, it was already night. The blazing mountain in the middle of the night was a gorgeous and magnificent sight. The night sky was dark and there were sparse stars scattered in the firmament, shining brightly and emitting a cold light. On the ground there was a boundless sea of fire. Raging scarlet flames surged and rose. Xianxia and Yunyao were traversing through the mountains, releasing their divine senses to explore the underground veins. Suddenly, a loud, dull sound came from the distant night sky. Rumble. The muffled sound was like muffled thunder in summer, rolling from the horizon and reverberating in the sky above the mountain of flames. Xianxia and Yunyao were awakened. They immediately looked up at the night sky in the depths of the fiery mountain. In the dark night sky, rays of colorful light flashed across like lightning. The dazzling multicolored lights condensed into sword and saber auras, as well as the shadows of various spells. They collided fiercely in the night sky, then collapsed and shattered. Clearly, there were experts fighting in the depths of the mountain of flames. Ever since Xianxia and Yunyao entered the flaming mountain, they had seen countless tribulation transcendence experts and saw many experts fighting. However, it was the first time they had seen such an earth-shattering scene. The area where the brilliance of the spells lit up was at least tens of thousands of miles away from them. Only experts above the 7th level of the tribulation transcendence realm could cause such an astonishing movement. The two stood on the top of the mountain looking at the night sky in the north, quietly observing. Suddenly, the two saw a huge fiery red shadow flashing in the light of the spells that lit up the night sky. That light shadow was at least dozens of miles long. Its appearance was like a giant dragon. It cut through the night sky fiercely and shattered countless sword and saber auras. Not long after, the two of them heard muffled sounds coming from the horizon, mixed with a few high-pitched dragon roars. Xianxia and Yunyao's expressions suddenly changed, and their eyes flashed with bright light. There's actually a dragon roar. Could that huge light shadow just now be the glazed fire dragon? The experts who come here are very cautious. They won't act rashly. If I'm not wrong, there should be a group of experts besieging the glazed fire dragon. The two of them exchanged a few words through voice transmission and then looked at each other. Why don't we go over and take a look? Okay. Even if we can't interfere, it's good to see it with our own eyes. After a short conversation, Xianxia and Yunyao reached a consensus and rushed to the north together. In order to reach the scene as soon as possible, Xianxia rode the primordial spirit magic sword and flew with Yunyao. As time passed, the two of them quickly approached the battlefield of the battle. The closer they were to the battlefield, the clearer the scene of the battle became. All kinds of dazzling and colorful spells constantly flickered in the night sky, weaving a breathtaking scene and blowing a storm that covered the sky. The giant dragon phantom that traversed the night sky appeared dozens of times. Xianxia and Yunyao became more and more certain that their judgment was correct. After a full 4 hours, the two of them flew 60,000 miles away and arrived near the battlefield. However, when the two of them arrived, the battle had already ended. The two of them could only see that the mountain range and the ground within a radius of 500 miles had turned into ruins. The ground was covered with huge pits and ravines, and there were piles of messy gravel everywhere. In many of the pits and ruins, there were also fragments of weapons and armor scattered, stained with dark red blood. There were also some scattered pieces of corpses scattered in every corner of the ruins, inconspicuous. The world was still filled with chaotic Dharma power aura, and the surging sea of fire could not wipe away the traces of the battle. Ji Tianxing and Yun Yao discovered that several groups of powerhouses were riddled with scars and looked terrible. These people looked depressed and quietly left the battlefield, retreating into the distance. In addition, many powerhouses rushed over from all directions to check the situation of the battlefield like them. The two of them didn't need to ask to know that those powerhouses must have seen the scene of the battle and rushed over to check it out. An hour later, the two of them checked the ruins and found many clues. During this period, Ji Tianxing also saved a seriously injured Tribulation Transcendence powerhouse who was on the verge of losing consciousness. After saving that powerhouse, he asked a lot of questions. That expert was filled with gratitude and told Ji Tianxing everything he knew about the situation. After he recovered some of his Dharma power, he bid farewell to Ji Tianxing and quietly left the battlefield. Ji Tianxing and Yun Yao also left the ruins and continued to rush into the depths of the flaming mountain. While hurrying, the two of them were still communicating with each other through voice transmission. It's a pity that we came too late. The glazed fire dragon has already escaped. I just asked. Last night, several groups of powerhouses discovered the glazed fire dragon and joined forces to besiege it. However, the first few groups of powerhouses who attacked were basically killed by the glazed fire dragon. The commotion of the battle attracted more people to join the battle and join forces to besiege the glazed fire dragon. However, those powerhouses were no match for the glazed fire dragon and suffered heavy casualties. Chapter 1764. After hearing Ji Tianxing's words, Yun Yao looked confused and surprised. Those top powers were all in the Crossing Calamity realm and most of them were above level 2. Dozens of top powers in the Crossing Calamity realm could not defeat the glazed fire dragon and more than half of them were killed? Has the glazed fire dragon reached the martial sage realm? Ji Tianxing shook his head and said firmly, I have asked that person just now. The glazed fire dragon's strength is definitely not at the martial sage realm. It is still in the Crossing Calamity realm. That is why those top powers dared to attack the glazed fire dragon when they found it. If it has reached the martial sage realm, who would dare to attack it? Yun Yao was enlightened and nodded, I see. But Granny Long said that the glazed fire dragon had passed through the 8th calamity 1,000 years ago. Now that 1,000 years have passed, why is the glazed fire dragon still in the Crossing Calamity realm? I don't know about that. Ji Tianxing said solemnly. Before that top power left, he told me that the glazed fire dragon's lair might be nearby. He has been exploring this area for half a month and has met hundreds of top powers in the Crossing Calamity realm. Now, everyone is searching for the glazed fire dragon's lair and they all want to tame it. Yun Yao looked at the sky in the north and said in a complicated tone, those top powers are rushing to the north. This means that the glazed fire dragon's lair might be somewhere in the north. Tianxing, should we continue to look for the mineral veins or should we rush over now? Ji Tianxing thought for a while and made up his mind. He said, we don't have to rush. Let's rush to the north and explore the mineral veins along the way. Yun Yao nodded. Then she thought of something important and asked, Tianxing, it is getting closer to your crossing calamity. Are you ready? Ji Tianxing smiled confidently and nodded. The calamity should come tomorrow. However, I can go through it at any time. Yun Yao shook her head and looked at him seriously. She advised, if we were on Luotian Mountain I wouldn't be worried about you. But this is Flame Mountain. Danger lurks at every step and experts are everywhere. Ji Tianxing smiled and said, it doesn't matter. Perhaps this is God's will. Yun Yao saw that he was so confident as if he had a card up his sleeve, and the worry in her heart dissipated. Unknowingly 10 hours had passed and it was already noon. Ji Tianxing and Yun Yao continued to explore. They had already explored tens of thousands of miles of mountain range. During this period the two of them discovered hundreds of mineral veins. Basically, they were all ancient mineral veins with a history of 10,000 years. All kinds of ancient mineral veins contained rare and precious ores and gems, which were very tempting. However, their goal was very clear. They would not waste time on those mineral veins. At this moment, when the two of them flew past a low-lying valley, Ji Tianxing suddenly stopped. He stood in the sky above the valley and looked down at the valley below. He concentrated on controlling his divine sense to explore the situation underground. Seeing that he had stopped, Yunyao asked him telepathically. Tianxing, did you find something? Tianxing nodded and said, there seems to be the aura of thunder and lightning under this valley. It's very unusual. Yunyao also released her divine sense, carefully probing the 100-mile-wide valley. Then she found some clues. There is indeed the power of thunder and wind. Could it be that there is wind and thunder meteorite iron under this valley? Tianxing smiled and said, it's very likely. Let's go down and take a look. After that, the two of them passed through the Sea of Fire and landed in the pale golden valley. The terrain of the valley was rather strange. It was like a huge porcelain bowl. The top was open and the bottom was flat. Moreover, the valley was surrounded by mountains as if a huge dragon was entrenched here. Special terrains and environments would often give birth to special heavenly treasures. This was the common knowledge of the martial arts world. Tianxing and Yunyao used the earth escape technique to pass through the pale golden ground and rock layer, and drilled into the depths of the ground. When the two of them drilled into the ground, they fell into a spacious cave. This cave with a radius of 10,000 feet was naturally formed. The cave was filled with raging red fire. The temperature was terrifyingly high, like a huge furnace. The walls of the cave were dark golden. There were also rows of icicle-like stalactites hanging on the ceiling. Tianxing was looking at the situation in the cave. At this time, Yunyao exclaimed in a low voice, Tianxing, look under your feet. He lowered his head and looked at the ground under his feet. He saw that the ground of the cave was quite flat. It was a layer of dark golden rock. The ground was covered with lines of the rock layer. They were densely packed and intertwined together, vaguely forming some kind of special pattern. Those lines were still glowing with dark red and light purple light, as if they were transmitting some kind of power. In the middle of the cave, there was a huge rock with a radius of 100 feet protruding from the ground. The huge rock was round like a huge millstone. Only the top half of it was exposed and the bottom half was connected to the ground. The lines on the ground and the rock extended to the surroundings of the huge rock and surrounded it. At first glance, the lines on the ground and the huge rock looked like a mysterious formation. Tianxing used his divine sense to sense for a moment and found that it was indeed a formation, and it was formed naturally. Not only the ground and the huge rock, but even the entire cave was filled with the power of a formation. There are all kinds of strange things in this world. I didn't expect this cave to form a natural formation. I don't know how many tens of thousands of years have passed before this place became like this today. Tianxing's eyes were filled with joy as he exclaimed. Yunyao also stared at the huge rock with bright eyes and said expectantly, Tianxing, that huge rock is the core and foundation of the formation. The power of heaven and earth absorbed by this natural formation has gathered in that huge rock. I can sense that terrifying heavenly flame, lightning, and astral wind energies have been accumulated in that seemingly ordinary rock. Tianxing nodded and said with a chuckle, now that you mention it, I feel that the huge rock is like an egg. As long as we peel off the eggshell, we will be able to find the treasure inside. Yunyao also revealed a faint smile and said in a complicated tone, I hope our guess is right. This huge rock has the materials you want. As she spoke, she took out the reverse water sword and walked toward the huge rock. She walked to the side of the huge rock and stood still. After a moment of consideration, she held the reverse water sword and slashed at a corner of the huge rock. Clang! With a crisp sound of metal colliding, the corner of the huge rock was cut off. A large piece of golden rock fell to the ground. The cut was smooth and flat, and it spewed out a scorching red fire. Chapter 1765. When the purple light lit up, a violent and ferocious lightning arc suddenly exploded in the air. Crack! Tianxing and Yunyao were pleasantly surprised when they saw the thunder. Just as I thought. We have the heavenly fire and thunder. Together with the astral wind, we have enough conditions to form the wind-thunder meteorite. Yunyao stared at the round boulder with sparkling eyes and said to Tianxing, Tianxing, this boulder should be a meteorite from outer space. Its material is very hard. Other than the reverse water divine sword, ordinary magical treasures can't cut it at all. Tianxing nodded in agreement and analyzed, it should be a meteorite from outer space. This is the only way to explain the origin of this valley, this cave, and this natural array. Maybe tens of thousands of years ago, a meteorite flew from outer space and smashed into this area. A deep pit was smashed into the ground. The bottom was small and flat. The top of the pit was spread out by the impact, forming the shape of a bowl. After many years, the deep pit became this bowl-like valley. This meteorite from outer space was also sleeping deep underground. The mysterious power of the meteorite and the special environment of the fiery mountain formed a cave here. After many years, the cave and the meteorite gradually absorbed the power of heaven and earth and formed this natural array. Later on, the array absorbed the heavenly fire, thunder, and astral wind and gathered them in the meteorite. It was these tens of thousands of years in this meteorite that created this marvelous scene today. Yun Yao agreed with Ji Tianxing's analysis. Tianxing, the process of your analysis should be the truth. Even if there are some deviations, it's not a big deal. However, this is just our guess. The key is whether or not the wind-thunder meteorite is formed in this meteorite. Ji Tianxing smiled and nodded. This is simple. Cut it open with the heavenly fire divine sword, and the answer will be revealed soon. Yun Yao nodded in agreement. She held the reverse water divine sword again and slashed at the huge meteorite. Another crisp clang rang out, and another corner of the meteorite was cut off by the divine sword. Yun Yao didn't break the meteorite directly because she was afraid of damaging the wind-thunder meteorite iron inside the meteorite. Like peeling a fruit, she held the reverse water divine sword and cut off the edges of the meteorite bit by bit. As time passed, the meteorite became smaller and smaller. The reverse water divine sword was truly capable of slicing through iron like mud. It was indestructible. Ji Tianxing collected the shaved meteorites and stored them in his spatial ring. This meteorite had been refined by the heaven fire, wind, and thunder for tens of thousands of years, and had become an extremely rare gem. It was already a top-grade treasure. Very quickly 2 hours passed. Yun Yao had also shaved more than half of the meteorite that had a radius of 10 zhang, leaving only 3 zhang in size. At the edge of the meteorite, purple stone could be clearly seen. It was formed after being nourished by lightning for tens of thousands of years. At the same time, the heavenly fire, lightning, and astral wind continued to surge out from the fracture. This made Yun Yao even more certain that the wind-thunder meteorite iron must have been formed in the core of the meteorite. She didn't feel tired at all. She continued to wield the reverse water divine sword and exploit the meteorite bit by bit. However, after more than half of the meteorite had been shaved off, the natural formation in the cave was destroyed. As time passed, the ground and walls of the cave began to change greatly. The rock layer on the ground began to crack. The lines and patterns on the ground were broken and twisted. The rock walls around the cave kept cracking. Even the stalactites on the ceiling of the cave broke and fell to the ground. Not long after, muffled rumbling sounds came from underground. The ground began to tremble. Ji Tianxing subconsciously thought that some powerful demon beast was hiding underground and had been awakened by him and Yun Yao. He immediately took out the sword of burial of heaven and checked the ground vigilantly. However, when he probed the ground with his soul consciousness, he found that no demon beast had appeared. It was only because the natural formation had been destroyed that the balance of this area was broken. That was why the ground had cracked and changed so drastically. The rumbling sounds became more and more deafening. The cave shook more and more violently. The ceiling of the cave kept cracking. Many golden boulders fell down and hit the ground with loud bangs. Ji Tianxing hurriedly blocked the boulders so that they wouldn't affect Yun Yao. Seeing that the cave was collapsing faster and faster, he reminded her, "Yao Yao, we have to speed up. The cave is about to collapse." Yun Yao answered without turning her head, "Okay. Hold on a little longer. We will see the results soon." As expected, she sped up and quickly cut the meteorite. About 7 minutes later, 90% of the huge meteorite had been cut. It was only 10 feet long. At this point, the dark golden meteorite had turned into a dazzling color. Not only was there the purple of the lightning thunder, but there was also the gold of the heavenly fire and the pale white of the astral wind. This was no longer just a meteorite. It was a magnificent gem. Suddenly, there was a loud rumbling sound. The crumbling cave could no longer withstand the impact of the ground cracking. It collapsed immediately. The walls of the cave collapsed. The huge ceiling of the cave was broken into pieces and smashed down with a terrifying force. "Yao Yao, be careful." Ji Tianxing's expression changed. He immediately took out his Kenshin battle robe and formed a pair of golden wings. He opened his wide golden wings to protect himself and Yun Yao. Boom, boom, boom. The huge boulders that covered the sky immediately drowned him and Yunyao. A deafening rumbling sound resounded through the sky. The valley within a 100-mile radius collapsed and caved in deeply. Tianxing and Yunyao were buried deep underground. The originally flat valley turned into a deep, broken pit. The mountains around the valley were also affected. They shook violently and cracked. Loud noises shook the sky. Fortunately, Tianxing and Yunyao were protected by the golden wings. They were not injured. However, the two of them were buried under endless earth and rocks. It was as if they were being suppressed by a huge mountain. They could not hold on for too long. Yunyao did not have time to slowly cut the meteorite and look for the wind and thunder meteorite iron. In a hurry, she had to use the water reverse divine sword to dig up the 3-meter-long 5-colored meteorite. The meteorite, which seemed to be only the size of a millstone, was actually as heavy as a 10,000-foot mountain. Tianxing opened the entrance of the sword world and put the whole meteorite into the sword world. He would slowly cut it up later. After doing all this, he and Yunyao tried their best to get out of the ground. However, the earth-shaking sound from before had already spread throughout a 1,000-mile radius. It had alarmed several groups of strong masters in the tribulation stage. Tianxing and Yunyao left the ruined valley. As soon as they flew high into the sky, they were targeted by 2 groups of strong masters. There were only 3 strong masters in one group. They seemed to be from a famous sect. They were all wearing Taoist robes and feathered crowns. However, there were 6 strong masters in the other group. They were all injured and looked ferocious. Chapter 1766. Yi flew quietly in the sea of fire and stared ahead gloomily. His long hair was fluttering in the wind. His face was cold and twisted and his whole body was surging with killing intent. He had found Tianxing and Yunyao in front of him and wanted to kill them immediately. But he kept calm and tried to restrain the anger and killing intent in his heart. He knew very well that although Tianxing and Yunyao looked weak, they had good fighting strength. If he acted rashly, even if he could injure them, he might not be able to kill them. Therefore, Yi waited patiently for an opportunity. The 5 injured bandits were following behind him and were on guard at all times. Everyone secretly followed Tianxing and Yunyao and flew 30,000 miles away. One of the bandits finally couldn't hold back the doubts in his heart and asked Yi through voice transmission, "Second Master, we finally found those 2 guys. When can we take action?" Yi replied through voice transmission without looking back, "Those 2 little bastards' strength and means can't be underestimated. We've already suffered a loss once before. How can we not learn a lesson? I've already contacted the First Master. They are in the depths of the Mountain of Flames in the north and are busy searching for the lair of the glazed fire dragon. Those 2 little bastards went straight to the north. They must want to find the glazed fire dragon's lair too. Since that's the case, they're walking right into the trap. We just need to follow them and we'll soon find a chance to kill them completely." The bandits all heard his voice transmission and immediately understood what he meant. "I understand. Second Master means that we just need to keep an eye on those 2 guys. That man and woman are rushing to the north and will soon meet the First Master and the others. At that time we can easily kill them. Second Master is wise. We've already failed once. We can't act rashly again." The bandits had seen Tianxing and Yunyao's means and were also seriously injured. If they had a choice, they certainly didn't want to fight with them again. One of them might die on the spot. Following the other party like this and waiting to meet up with the First Master was both worry-free and safe, so why not? However, at this moment, Yi suddenly realized that Tianxing and Yunyao had changed their route. They did not continue to fly north. Instead, they turned around and flew east. Judging from the 2's movements, it seemed like they had suddenly discovered something and changed their minds. Yi immediately frowned and his face darkened. He cursed to himself, 2 damned little bastards. Could it be that they had already discovered that this monarch was following them? But this monarch has used the most covert tracking technique and has always maintained a distance of 50 kilometers from them. It's impossible for them to discover me. Yi muttered in his heart and was slightly bewildered. The criminals behind him also noticed that Tianxing and Yunyao had changed their direction. They immediately became anxious. "Second Master, those 2 fellows actually went east. Have they already discovered us? Second Master, what should we do now? Continue to follow them? They must have discovered us. If we don't take action now, I'm afraid they will escape again. Second master, make a decision quickly. When Yiya heard the words of the criminals, his face immediately darkened and he scolded in a dignified tone. It must be because you pieces of trash were exposed that they were alerted. The criminals were rendered speechless by his scolding. They could only remain silent and could not refute him. Yiya continued, "What are you waiting for? Follow those two fellows closely and see what they want to do. If they want to escape, we'll take action." After that he sped up with the criminals for fear that Ji Tianxing and Yun Yao would escape. About 2 hours later, both parties had flown more than 10,000 kilometers. At this time Ji Tianxing and Yun Yao suddenly stopped. The two of them landed in a deep valley and hid at the bottom of the valley. On both sides of the canyon were towering mountains that were thousands of feet high and stretched for tens of thousands of kilometers. The canyon was hundreds of kilometers long and dozens of kilometers wide. The terrain was quite rugged and steep. The raging red fire enveloped the canyon and obscured the situation at the bottom, making it impossible to see clearly. Yiya saw Ji Tianxing and Yun Yao enter the bottom of the canyon with his own eyes and immediately revealed a sinister smile. Those two reckless things, could it be that they still want to rely on this canyon to escape from this monarch's pursuit? It just so happens that the terrain here is desolate and almost no one comes to disturb us. Since they've chosen to hide here, we'll turn this canyon into their burial ground. As he spoke, Yiya led the criminals and rushed into the canyon with a murderous aura. Of course, Yiya did not want to repeat the same mistake and could not just charge in recklessly. After entering the canyon, he first ascertained the location of Ji Tianxing and Yun Yao. Then he took out 5 palm-sized black statues and handed them to the 5 criminals. "The few of you take my 5 poison command and go to the 5 directions of Ding, Mao, Qin, Yin and Hai respectively. Follow my instructions and plant the 5 poison command. I want to set up a heaven extinction earthly fiend 5 poison formation and seal this canyon so that they have no place to escape. This time we can only succeed, we cannot fail." The 5 criminals each took a black statue and revealed a look of anticipation. They nodded solemnly to show that they understood. Then the 5 criminals spread out in the canyon with the 5 poison command and went to set up the array foundation. Yiya stood in the sky above the canyon and took out many spirit stones, compasses and array formation materials. He began to set up a tribulation level array. The heaven extinction earthly fiend 5 poison formation he wanted to set up was a high-grade tribulation level array. It could seal hundreds of miles of heaven and earth and release the heaven extinction earthly fiend 5 poison to kill all living things. Hundreds of years ago he was the notorious butcher and executioner of the heaven extinction divine kingdom. He once used the heaven extinction earthly fiend 5 poison formation to destroy a 1,000-year-old ancient city overnight and poison more than 1 million people to ashes. Even the birds and beasts inside and outside the city as well as the ants and insects underground were all wiped out. Under the cover of the array, hundreds of miles of heaven and earth were barren. Now that hundreds of years had passed, his strength was several times stronger, and the power of the array he used was also more powerful. He had absolute confidence that once the array was set up, Ji Tianxing and Yun Yao would not be able to escape and would not be able to escape. At the same time, in a cave at the bottom of the valley, Ji Tianxing was sitting cross-legged in the cave, meditating with a solemn expression. Yun Yao was holding the reverse water divine sword and guarding the entrance of the cave with a serious expression. Her eyes were full of concern. She looked at Ji Tianxing, then looked up at the sky and prayed silently. "Tianxing, oh Tianxing, even if you are a genius, nothing must happen to you during the tribulation in the flaming mountain." Just as she was praying in her heart, the sky above the valley began to change. Chapter 1767. In a short 100 breaths of time, the entire canyon was covered by gray clouds. Endless gray clouds gathered together, spinning rapidly, forming a black vortex with a radius of 100 miles. Purple and blue lightning arcs flickered continuously in the pitch-black vortex, lighting up with dazzling lightning. An incomparably violent hurricane pressed down, blowing away the heavenly fire in the canyon. Yiya and the 5 bandits were busy setting up the grand array, and it was about to be completed. Suddenly seeing the strange phenomenon in the sky, everyone stopped and revealed a bewildered expression. "What's going on? Why did a heaven and earth phenomenon suddenly appear? Heavens! Those black clouds filling the sky are clearly tribulation clouds. Is someone going to transcend tribulation? Impossible. Among us, even if someone is going to transcend tribulation, they have to wait several decades, right? Tribulation clouds and heavenly lightning appearing at the same time. Someone is definitely going to transcend tribulation. If the person transcending tribulation isn't us, then it's very likely to be that man and woman. No wonder they suddenly changed direction and ran to hide in this canyon. Turns out they want to transcend tribulation here. It's really heaven's will. Looks like we don't need to make a move. That young man and woman are going to die under the heavenly tribulation. The bandits discussed telepathically. They were all gloating and excited. Yia also had the same thought, a mocking sneer at the corners of his mouth, waiting to watch a good show. He looked down at the canyon from above and muttered to himself, "Heaven is helping me. Looks like I don't need to make a move. Those two little bastards are going to turn to ashes under the heavenly tribulation soon." After saying that, he used divine sense voice transmission to order the 5 bandits. Everyone, no need to perfect the grand array. Even if it's set up, it will be destroyed by the heavenly tribulation. You guys stay by the 5 poison token and keep an eye on the movements in the canyon at all times. Keep an eye on those 2 fellows for me. If they are killed by the heavenly tribulation, it's fine. If they luckily transcend the heavenly tribulation, you guys immediately make a move and be sure to kill them. The 5 bandits hurriedly agreeing very readily. Probably in their minds, Xianxia and Yunyao absolutely could not transcend the heavenly tribulation and would definitely be killed by the heavenly lightning. After all, every martial artist would choose an absolutely safe place to avoid being disturbed when transcending tribulation. Even so, there was still a slim chance of survival under the heavenly tribulation. Everyone was certain that there was no need for them to make a move today. They only needed to watch the show. The tribulation cloud vortex and lightning above the canyon became more and more dazzling and terrifying. Even from thousands of miles away, one could clearly see the tribulation clouds and lightning in the sky. 2 groups of tribulation transcendence experts happened to pass by. One of the groups consisted of 3 women. The leader was an old granny with a head full of white hair. She was holding a golden dragon head walking stick. Following behind her was a middle-aged woman in luxurious clothes and a young woman with a pretty face and an icy temperament. When the 3 of them saw the tribulation clouds and lightning in the sky, they secretly discussed for a while before rushing in the direction of the tribulation cloud vortex. The other group consisted of 2 men. The leader was a white-haired old man wearing a purple robe. He held a golden horsetail whisk in his hand and wore a crown with 3 flowers and 7 stars on his head. Behind him was a young man dressed in black. He was tall and sturdy and had a valiant aura. The 2 of them were hurrying through the sea of fire when they suddenly saw the tribulation clouds and lightning in the sky. The purple-robed old man immediately stopped. He frowned as he looked at the tribulation clouds in the sky. He muttered to himself in surprise, "Someone is actually transcending tribulation in the flaming mountain? Are they tired of living?" The young man also raised his head to look at the sky, revealing a shocked expression. He said in disbelief, "The flaming mountain is so dangerous, yet there is actually someone who dares to transcend tribulation here? Even if one transcends tribulation in a safe place, it is still a slim chance of survival. To transcend tribulation in such a dangerous environment, wouldn't one die without a doubt?" After saying that, the young man looked at the purple-robed old man and asked, "Martial Uncle Brightsword, this kind of thing is really rare. Should we go over and take a look?" The purple-robed old man was Martial Lord Brightsword. He frowned and thought for a moment before saying hesitantly, "Qinyu, we still have business to do." The young man named Qinyu bowed and said, "Martial Uncle, so many experts are searching for the glazed fire dragon's lair, but there is no result. Even if we rush over, what's the use? Now that someone is transcending tribulation in the flaming mountain, this kind of thing is very rare. Don't you want to go and take a look? Perhaps the person transcending tribulation is very confident and is a talented person?" Qinyu was curious and wanted to see what was going on, so he tried his best to arouse Martial Lord Brightsword's interest. Martial Lord Brightsword understood his thoughts and no longer refused. He chuckled and said, "Sai, you brat, you clearly want to go and watch the show, yet you're still beating around the bush." Qinyu pretended to be simple and honest and asked tentatively, "Martial Uncle Brightsword, does that mean you agree? Let's go and take a look. It won't take long." Martial Lord Brightsword stroked his beard and nodded in agreement. Soon after, an old man and a young man flew over the sea of fire and rushed to the place where the tribulation cloud vortex appeared. In a cave deep in the canyon, Ji Tianxing had already circulated his energy and adjusted his breathing for a quarter of an hour, raising his cultivation and mental state to the peak. He was already prepared to welcome the heavenly tribulation. At this moment, the tribulation cloud vortex high in the sky had already formed. It had a radius of 100 miles and was as black as ink. Billions of lightning bolts flickered in the vortex and were about to condense into heavenly lightning that could destroy the heavens and earth. Ji Tianxing stopped circulating his energy and opened his eyes to look at Yun Yao at the entrance of the cave. He revealed a smile and warned, "Yao Yao, you don't have to worry about me. I'll be fine. Quickly leave this canyon and hide further away. I'm afraid that the heavenly tribulation will affect you." Yun Yao looked at the tribulation cloud in the sky and felt a little nervous. She said with a heart full of worry, "Tianxing, compared to my tribulation cloud, your tribulation cloud is condensing faster and has a wider range. Its power is definitely several times stronger. You must not be careless and you must not have any accidents." Ji Tianxing understood her feelings, so he nodded and said, "All right, I'll be careful. Don't worry. Don't help me or else the consequences will be unimaginable." Yun Yao nodded with a solemn expression, then turned around and left. For safety's sake, she entered the reverse water divine sword and manipulated it to become the size of an embroidery needle. She quietly hid on a mountain peak 50 miles away. At such a close distance she could watch Ji Tianxing transcend the tribulation and protect Ji Tianxing. If Ji Tianxing's life was in danger, she would save him even if she was killed by the heavenly lightning. She had just found a place to hide and manipulated the reverse water divine sword to hide in the rock layer when Ji Tianxing's heavenly tribulation began. Boom. Chapter 1768. The dazzling purple lightning tore through the sky like a sharp sword and pierced into the depths of the canyon. A sacred and mighty invisible pressure pressed down from the sky and shrouded the entire canyon. Yun Yao, Yiya, and the 5 bandits were all shrouded by the invisible force and their faces changed immediately. Oh my god! The first heavenly thunder is hundreds of feet long and has such a terrifying power? That kid hasn't reached the crossing calamity realm yet, has he? How can the heavenly thunder he triggered be comparable to a 4th stage crossing calamity realm expert? What a terrifying heavenly thunder. It actually made my mind tremble. This is incredible. It's too terrifying. Even when I was crossing the calamity realm, the heavenly thunder was not so powerful. Everyone was shocked. They stared at the heavenly thunder and couldn't wait to see the result. Ji Tianxing was still standing in the cave with a calm and composed posture, as if he didn't care about the heavenly thunder at all. In the next moment, there was a loud explosion that shook the sky. The hundreds of feet-long purple heavenly thunder blasted the ground apart and instantly destroyed the cave where Ji Tianxing was. The lightning engulfed his figure, and an endless amount of gravel and dust flew in all directions. The area within 100 miles became chaotic and was covered by the purple heavenly thunder. After a long time, the heavenly thunder and smoke dissipated and the canyon returned to calm. Everyone looked at the bottom of the canyon and saw that the ground was full of cracks and there was a huge black pit in the middle. Right above the deep pit, Ji Tianxing in a white robe was standing in the sky unscathed. No one knew how he blocked the heavenly thunder. No one knew that he not only blocked the heavenly thunder but also absorbed most of its power. Yiya and the 5 bandits were dumbfounded and let out an incredulous roar. How is this possible? That kid actually blocked the heavenly thunder. Oh my god. That's the heavenly thunder that can only be triggered by a 4th or 5th stage crossing calamity realm expert. How did he block it? That kid is really a monster. He's not human at all. Only Yun Yao looked relieved. She secretly heaved a sigh of relief and felt gratified for Ji Tianxing. At this moment, the second heavenly thunder was condensed in the tribulation cloud vortex. Boom. Following an explosion that shook the 9 heavens, a dark blue pillar of lightning shot down from the tribulation cloud vortex. This bolt of heavenly lightning was 1,500 feet long, and its might was more than 2 times stronger than the first one. In the blink of an eye, the lightning beam struck the depths of the canyon and engulfed Ji Tianxing's figure. Yun Yao's heart was in her throat again. She looked worried and shouted in her heart, "Why is this happening? Why was Tianxing's heavenly tribulation so terrifying?" Back when I was transcending my tribulation, the seventh bolt of lightning was less than 300 meters. His first heavenly thunder was 300 meters long, and the power of his second heavenly thunder was even more terrifying. Why is God so unfair to him? Yiya and the 5 bandits held their breaths nervously, waiting for the bolt of lightning to strike. They were all praying in their hearts. They really wanted to see Ji Tianxing's tragic state of being killed by the heavenly thunder. At the same time, the 3 women, Bright Sword Martial Lord, and the others had already rushed to the vicinity of the canyon. Both groups of people saw the tribulation cloud vortex with a radius of 100 miles with their own eyes, as well as the terrifying heavenly thunder. Seeing this scene, Bright Sword Martial Lord and the white-haired old woman made a judgment almost at the same time. Such a huge tribulation cloud vortex and such a terrifying heavenly thunder. It must be a 5th-level tribulation transcendence realm expert transcending the tribulation here. The 2 groups of people rushed to the east and west sides of the canyon. They hid on the mountain peak and silently observed the situation in the canyon. Not long after, the rubble, smoke and blue lightning arcs that covered the sky dissipated. Ji Tianxing's figure appeared. He was still standing in the air, unharmed. He even maintained his posture of lying on his back and hugging the sky with his arms outstretched. Looking at his movements, it was as if he was hugging the heavenly thunder that fell from the sky. He looked like he was enjoying it very much. No one noticed that the third eye on his forehead flashed with a dark blue light and quickly closed. Everyone was dumbfounded. Their faces were full of horror. Especially Bright Sword Martial Lord Qinyu and the 3 women. They were stunned on the spot and their expressions were exceptionally wonderful. The white-haired old woman leaned on her walking stick and stared at Ji Tianxing with a burning gaze. After a long silence, she let out a long sigh. Heavens! There are actually times when I misjudge. I originally thought that the person transcending the tribulation must have reached the 5th stage. I didn't expect it to be a 9th-level essence soul realm kid. His first tribulation attracted such a terrifying heavenly thunder? What kind of genius is this? The middle-aged woman's face was also filled with shock. She nodded repeatedly and said, Madame Jean, it seems that we didn't come here in vain. Such a young genius is definitely one that only appears once in 100 years. Even the young woman with a beautiful face and an ice-cold temperament stared at Ji Tianxing with a burning gaze. Her handsome face was filled with amazement. What a powerful talent. He actually dares to treat the heavenly thunder as nothing. This person is so monstrous. He definitely isn't a nobody. The middle-aged woman glanced at her and joked with a smile. Rong, that kid looks handsome and has extraordinary talent. He must be a 1 in a million talent. Only a genius like him is worthy of you. If he succeeds in transcending the tribulation, I will be your matchmaker. How about it? A hint of shyness flashed through the young woman's eyes, but her expression was still calm. She said in a calm tone, Rong will follow your decision. But it's still too early to say this. It's not too late to wait until that young master succeeds in transcending the tribulation. Hearing her answer, the middle-aged woman smiled even more and joked, Our Rong has always been proud and arrogant. She doesn't put men of the same generation in her eyes and speaks bluntly to anyone. I didn't expect to meet that white-robed young master today. Finally, someone can enter Rong's eyes. It's really not easy. The young woman's temperament was cold, indifferent, and arrogant. How could she stand such teasing from her master's wife? Her cheeks immediately flushed red. She turned her head away in embarrassment and pursed her lips tightly without speaking. Madame Jean glanced at the middle-aged woman and pretended to cough. She reminded, Jiyu Ronger is thin-skinned. Don't make fun of her. Let's watch that young master transcend the tribulation first. He's not simple. This heavenly tribulation is very likely to be unprecedented. It's our honor to be able to witness it with our own eyes. Hearing Madame Jin's solemn tone, the middle-aged woman also stopped smiling and looked at Ji Tianxing attentively. Rong-er's embarrassment eased a lot. She also looked at Ji Tianxing with rapt attention for fear of missing any details. On the other side, the faces of Martial Lord Brightsword and Qinyu became rather awkward and ugly. Qinyu stared at Ji Tianxing with wide eyes and exclaimed in disbelief, It's actually him? That bastard who rudely offended Martial Uncle? Why did he come here and even transcend the tribulation here? Martial Lord Brightsword also looked at Ji Tianxing with a complicated expression. His expression became rather strange. He was silent for a long time before he stroked his beard and said, "No wonder that kid is so arrogant and condescending. Turns out that he does have some ability. However, he's too young after all. He hasn't reached the tribulation realm yet. It's too early to be happy. How can the heavenly tribulation be so easy to pass? No matter how outstanding his talent is, if he can't pass the heavenly tribulation, he will be annihilated." Hearing Martial Lord Brightsword's words, Qin Yu's mood immediately relaxed a lot. That inexplicable jealousy also dissipated a lot. He hurriedly cupped his hands and said with a smile, "Martial uncle is right. The tribulation realm is the biggest hurdle in a martial artist's life. If you can cross it, you will soar to the 9th heaven. If you can't, you will vanish into thin air." Chapter 1769. Just as everyone was secretly discussing, another earth-shattering explosion erupted. Kaboom! A third bolt of heavenly lightning brewed in the tribulation cloud vortex. A 200-foot-long dark golden lightning bolt struck towards Xianxia in the canyon. In that instant, golden light shone for hundreds of miles, illuminating the dark sky. The terrifying divine might of lightning suppressed the entire canyon, causing everyone's bodies to tremble, revealing a look of fear and dread. No one had expected that Xianxia's third bolt of heavenly lightning would be so terrifying. Such a powerful heavenly lightning could only be triggered by a 6th-level tribulation transcendence realm expert. The hearts of Yunyao, Madame Jean, and the others immediately rose to their throats as they broke out in cold sweat for Xianxia. Yia, the 5 bandits, Brightsword Martial Lord, and the others held their breaths as they stared at the canyon. They saw that Xianxia still did not take out his weapon to block. He looked up at the sky and waved his arms to cast a secret technique to welcome the descent of the golden heavenly lightning. Boom! Amidst the earth-shaking explosion, the dark golden pillar of lightning drowned him and struck the canyon. On the ground formed by golden rocks, a huge pit with a radius of 10 miles was immediately created and countless rubble collapsed. Dozens of wide ravines split open in all directions, almost covering the entire canyon. Stone fragments and smoke rose into the air, covering the sky for 100 miles. After a long time, the canyon regained its clarity, and Xianxia's figure appeared again. He was still in his snow-white robe, neat and tidy, and his expression was very calm. The golden heavenly lightning just now had been easily resolved by him without any effort. Seeing this scene, Yiya and the bandits were shocked to the point of numbness. When they came back to their senses, they cursed angrily. "Damn bastard, he actually blocked the heavenly lightning so easily again. What the hell? Even we might not be able to block such a terrifying heavenly lightning. How could he be safe and sound? It's too damn strange. Second leader, we can't wait any longer. If we allow that kid to successfully overcome the heavenly tribulation, I'm afraid it won't be easy to kill him." When Yiya heard the bandits' telepathic messages, he secretly clenched his fists as a murderous intent flashed in his eyes. However, after some consideration, he decided not to make a move for the time being. "Everyone, calm down and wait patiently for a moment. The first 3 heavenly thunders are the simplest, but the later ones will become more and more powerful." The criminals understood what he meant, so they suppressed their anxiety and worry and continued to observe the situation. At this moment, the tribulation cloud vortex high in the sky began to change. The tribulation clouds became even darker, and the wind became even more piercingly cold. The tribulation clouds' whirlpool spun even faster. Within the vortex, purple, blue, gold, and crimson lights flickered continuously. Not long after, the 4th bolt of lightning appeared. Boom! It was a 300-meter-long lightning pillar formed by 3 different colored lightning bolts, crimson heavenly flames and white gales. This bolt of heavenly lightning carried the power to destroy the heavens and earth as it ruthlessly struck towards Xianxia in the canyon. Seeing this scene, the expressions of the crowd who were secretly watching all changed drastically as they widened their eyes in shock. No. How could this be? It's only the 4th bolt of heavenly lightning, how could it be so powerful? Yunyao's heart was burning with worry and her face was as pale as paper. She was extremely worried for Xianxia. Madame Jean, Ronga, and the other 2 also revealed puzzled and shocked expressions as they exclaimed repeatedly. "Too terrifying. There are actually 3 types of heavenly lightning as well as astral winds and heavenly flames. Just what level has that kid's talent reached? In my impression, such a terrifying heavenly lightning has never appeared in the past few hundred years. If the 4th bolt of heavenly lightning is already so terrifying, then how shocking would the heavenly lightning after that be? The expressions of Bright Sword Martial Lord and Qin Yu became increasingly unsightly. Especially Honorable Sword Martial Lord. Just now he had solemnly vowed that Ji Tianqing was happy too early. However, the appearance of the 4th bolt of heavenly lightning proved that Ji Tianqing's talent far exceeded everyone's imagination. He only felt his old face burning and a hint of embarrassment flashed across his eyes. However, Qin Yu did not notice Bright Sword Martial Lord's expression. His eyes stared fixedly at Ji Tianqing, revealing a look of intense jealousy. Regardless of whether Ji Tianqing could block this bolt of heavenly lightning or not, for him to be able to trigger such a terrifying bolt of heavenly lightning, it proved that his talent was outstanding and that he was a peerless genius. This already made Qin Yu extremely jealous. In the next instant, the 5-colored heavenly lightning struck Ji Tianqing, drowning his figure. At the critical moment, he did not cast a spell to devour the power of lightning. After all, it was too dangerous. He chose to use the Kenshin battle robe, turning it into a pair of golden wings to protect himself. The destructive 5-colored divine lightning struck the golden wings, smashing him into the deep pit at the bottom of the valley. The charred pit on the ground instantly expanded by more than 2 times. The area within 100 miles of the pit was completely turned into ruins. Not even a millstone-sized stone could be found. Smoke, dust, and lightning covered the sky and lasted for a long time before dissipating. Everyone stuck their heads out and looked down, searching for Ji Tianqing's trace. Yiya and the bandits were all secretly looking forward to it and were excited as they asked each other through voice transmission. "How is it? Did you find that kid? Such a terrifying heavenly lightning, he definitely can't withstand it. He was most likely struck to death, right? And if it were us, we would have been killed by that bolt of heavenly lightning. Even if that kid didn't die, he would definitely be seriously injured. Everyone quickly find his corpse. The second leader has instructed that if he's alive, we want to see him. If he's dead, we want to see his corpse." However, just as the bandits were discussing, a golden light flew out from the ruins. Swoosh! Ji Tianqing flapped his golden wings and flew into the sky safely, appearing in front of everyone's eyes. Immediately, everyone was in an uproar again, revealing complicated expressions. Some cursed angrily, some heaved a sigh of relief, and some exclaimed in surprise. Ji Tianqing had already sensed that something was amiss and found that there were several groups of powerhouses hiding around the valley. However, he didn't care and continued to focus on transcending the tribulation. He had already expected that the commotion caused by his tribulation would definitely alarm many powerhouses and attract countless people to watch. A moment later, the 5th bolt of heavenly lightning condensed in the vortex of tribulation clouds and struck down. Boom! Ji Tianqing used the same trick and used the golden rock wings again to protect himself. The 4,000 feet long 5-colored heavenly lightning was twice as powerful as before and instantly struck him. He was struck into the ruins again, smashing deep into the ground. The entire valley was destroyed by the lightning and turned into scorched ruins hundreds of miles wide. Thunder and wind surged. The 1,000-feet-long mountain ranges on both sides of the valley were also affected by the huge impact. They shook violently and huge cracks appeared. Chapter 1770. Although Yiya and the bandits all hoped that Ji Tianqing would be killed by the lightning. However, what happened before made them understand that Ji Tianqing was an incomparably monstrous genius. He would not die so easily. They stared at the ruins in the canyon, using their divine senses to search for Ji Tianqing's figure. Not long after, shattering sounds came from the ruins and countless gravel was sent flying. A golden light flew out from the ruins and returned to the sky. Without a doubt, Ji Tianqing successfully blocked the 5th bolt of lightning and he was still uninjured. His expression and aura of magic power didn't change much. However, the golden wings on his back dimmed a bit. Clearly he used up quite a bit of power. Seeing that, Yiya and the bandits all revealed heavy disappointment. Yun Yao and Madame Jean were relieved of a heavy burden as they secretly breathed a sigh of relief. The middle-aged woman, Rong, the Honorable Sword Martial Lord, and the others were almost numb from the shock. They didn't know what to say. At that moment, the sixth bolt of lightning arrived as scheduled. Boom. The 500 feet long pillar of lightning was formed by the convergence of 6 colors. Not only were there 3 types of lightning, there was also sky fire, astral wind, and dark green poison. That poison was formed by the convergence of the power of the world. It was a rare poison of the world from ancient to modern times. When they saw that bolt of lightning appear, ordinary experts could only feel shock from its horrifying power. But Madame Jean and Yiya, the knowledgeable martial lords, widened their eyes in shock as if they saw a ghost. Heavens! It's actually 6 types of lightning. This boy is definitely the #1 genius who shakes the ancients and dazzles the contemporaries. This is too unbelievable. I actually saw a miracle with my own eyes. In the past 1,000 years, there were only 2 people who could trigger 6 types of lightning. This boy is actually one of them. When the middle-aged woman and Rong heard Madame Jin's exclamation, they immediately turned their heads to look at her, revealing puzzled gazes. However, Madame Jean stared straight at the bolt of lightning without any intention to explain. Boom! Following a huge explosion that shook the universe, the canyon with a circumference of 600 miles was destroyed on the spot, becoming a pile of rubble and ruins. In the middle of the ruins, an abyss with a circumference of 50 miles and a depth of 10 miles appeared. More than half of the dark golden mountain ranges on both sides of the valley collapsed as well, sending rocks flying everywhere. Such an earth-shattering power could be clearly heard from thousands of miles away. Many onlookers had no choice but to retreat again, keeping a distance of 100 miles from Tianxia. When the smoke and dust dissipated, a dim golden light flew out from the abyss in the ruins. Shua. After the golden light faded, the white-robed Tianxia once again appeared in the sky. The golden wings on his back had already dimmed. It was obvious that he had used up all his energy. He had no choice but to retract his golden wings and take out the sword of burial of heaven. He stood above the ruins with his left hand behind his back and his right hand holding the sword of burial of heaven. He looked up at the tribulation cloud vortex. His handsome and resolute face revealed a strong sense of confidence. His deep and boundless eyes also revealed an incomparably resolute look. 100 miles away, Ronger's eyes were fixed on him. All her attention was attracted by his figure, unable to move away. Grandma Jean and the middle-aged woman also revealed gratified and amazed expressions. They were full of expectations and appreciation for Tianxia. Grandma Jean raised her golden walking stick and pointed at the tribulation cloud vortex in the sky. She said excitedly, "It's already rare for this person to be able to survive 6 bolts of lightning unscathed. The fact that the tribulation cloud vortex hasn't dissipated means that he's going to attract the 7th bolt of lightning. A person who can attract 6 bolts of lightning is a once-in-a-century genius. A person who can attract the 7th and 8th bolts of lightning is a once-in-a-millennium genius." The middle-aged woman nodded slightly and said excitedly, "If the white-robed man can safely survive 6 bolts of lightning, he'll definitely be able to survive the 7th bolt of lightning. Even if he's severely injured, he'll be fine. There hasn't been such a genius in our vast divine nation for thousands of years. I've heard that there was a first disciple of God on Mount God Bestowment who was highly valued by the Divine Master and was praised as a once-in-a-millennium genius. It's a pity that the first disciple of God left Mount God Bestowment for some unknown reason. Alas." Speaking of this, the middle-aged woman sighed regretfully, feeling rather regretful. Ronger didn't even turn her head. She stared at Tianxia and said coldly, "That first disciple of God is probably just an undeserved reputation. Moreover, he betrayed the divine nation and has an inferior personality. This white-robed man, on the other hand, is handsome and has an outstanding temperament. He must be a noble and loyal genius." Grandma Jin's heart suddenly moved. She secretly transmitted a message to the middle-aged woman and said, "Jiyu Ronger only saw the young man from afar and she's so sure to protect him. I'm afraid that Ronger has fallen in love with him at first sight. If there's a chance, try to match the young man with Ronger. If they can get married, it'll be a great thing for the Divine Nation and the Green Dragon Association." The middle-aged woman bowed slightly and replied, "Grandma, don't worry. Jiyu knows what to do." At this moment, the vortex of tribulation clouds in the sky completed its transformation. What puzzled everyone was that the vortex of tribulation clouds, which was as dark as ink, actually lit up with 7-colored dazzling light. Tens of thousands of 7-colored dazzling lights condensed into 7 brilliant pillars of light, which hung down from the sky like a waterfall. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. The 7-colored light, with a mysterious and invisible power, hit Ji Tianxing with a loud bang and drowned his figure. However, there was no earth-shattering sound, nor was there a scene of destruction. The 7-colored light burst open and turned into a huge ball of light, enveloping Ji Tianxing and floating above the ruins. The world was quiet, and the air was filled with a strange and mysterious atmosphere. Yiya, Martial Lord Handsome Sword, and many strong people in the Tribulation realm were all dumbfounded, and their faces were full of astonishment. Everyone thought that the 7th bolt of heavenly lightning would definitely destroy the heavens and the earth, and its power would be unprecedented. But no one had expected that there would be no heavenly lightning but 7 pillars of light. The most inconceivable thing was that the 7 pillars of light were so gentle that they didn't seem to have any lethality at all. After everyone came back to their senses, they immediately began to discuss with doubts. It's really too strange. What kind of heavenly tribulation is this? There's not even heavenly lightning. It's really strange. The 7th bolt of heavenly lightning should have destroyed the heavens and the earth. Why is there no movement at all? That kid is a freak, and the heavenly tribulation he triggered is also extremely strange. I've never heard of such a situation. I've read a lot of ancient books, but I've never heard of such a thing. Everyone was puzzled and felt that it was inconceivable. Only Grandma Jean frowned and pondered for a long time. Suddenly she thought of something and her expression changed drastically. Her eyes revealed a strong sense of horror. Chapter 1771. 7 Emotions Tribulation? Granny, what's the 7 Emotions Tribulation? The middle-aged woman and Ronger looked at Granny Jean in confusion. Granny Jean was quite excited. Her eyes were bright and she explained in a serious tone. The so-called 7 Emotions Tribulation refers to the tribulation of 7 emotions and 6 desires. The ancients said that everyone in the world has 7 emotions and 6 desires. That's why there's love, hatred, greed, anger, and madness. If people don't have the 7 emotions and 6 desires, they'll be like plants, and those with high magic power will be saints. When saints are born and are destined to become gods, they'll have to accept the test of God and bear the tribulation of 7 emotions and 6 desires. Hearing Granny Jin's explanation, the middle-aged woman and Ronger were shocked and incredulous. Saints are born? Only those who are destined to become gods can trigger the tribulation of 7 emotions and 6 desires. No wonder I've never heard of the 7 emotions tribulation. Doesn't that mean that white-robed man is a saint and is destined to become a god? His talent and aptitude have actually reached such a terrifying level? Granny Jean nodded slightly and said with a serious expression, I've only seen information about the 7 emotions tribulation in an ancient book. I didn't expect to see this legendary heavenly tribulation with my own eyes today. It said that those who can trigger the 7 emotions tribulation are either world-shaking geniuses or the reincarnation of gods. I don't know if that white-robed man is the former or the latter. The middle-aged woman and Ronger were silent as they stared at the colorful light in the canyon. No matter which answer it was extremely shocking to them. On the other side, Yiya and the bandits were all anxious as they discussed telepathically. They didn't know what was going on. Someone suggested to sneak an attack on Ji Tianxing and kill him in one fell swoop. However, Yiya considered carefully and decided to continue observing. Time passed quietly. The dazzling 7-colored light in the canyon quietly floated and slowly rotated. Everyone stared at the light secretly, waiting for the result. After about half an hour, the originally calm colorful light suddenly spun faster. Swoosh, swoosh. The dazzling light surged violently and released thousands of rays of light, illuminating the entire canyon. No one knew what was happening in the colorful light or what Ji Tianxing had experienced. Suddenly, a loud sound burst out and resounded through the sky. Boom! Following a deafening explosion, the rainbow light suddenly shattered and a dazzling golden light flew out from it. It was that dazzling golden light that had split the entire ball of light into pieces. Countless rainbow-colored fragments scattered in all directions, falling on the ruins. The golden light flew back into the sky and stopped, revealing a white-robed figure. Shua! Everyone took a closer look and saw that it was Ji Tianxing. His clothes were undamaged, but his long hair was a little messy. His face was pale as he panted, and there was a trace of blood at the corner of his mouth. Other than that, he didn't have any obvious injuries. The seventh bolt of heavenly thunder had already been neutralized by him. Seeing this scene, everyone was inexplicably shocked. Madame Jean was the most amazed. Her eyes were full of admiration as she nodded repeatedly and said, "This king really didn't guess wrong. That boy is really a shocking genius, and his character is also excellent. A genius who can withstand the test of the seven emotions tribulation must have a firm will and a loyal heart. He has indeed successfully passed it." When Ronger heard this, she couldn't help but be puzzled. She secretly asked the middle-aged woman what this sentence meant. The middle-aged woman replied, "What Granny means is that the white-robed young master's character is very determined. Once he has made up his mind, he will never turn back and will have no regrets. At the same time, this person is very loyal. He has his own opinions and principles. He will never mix up worldly affairs and feelings. He has his own bottom line and integrity. All in all, Ronger, you guessed right. That white-robed young master's character and temperament are absolutely first class." Ronger's eyes suddenly brightened and a touch of expectation appeared in her eyes. "You mean that if that young master has made up his mind about a girl, he will be loyal and never betray her?" "Of course," the middle-aged woman said in a firm tone. At the same time, Ji Tianxing was standing in the sky, silently adjusting his breath. The tribulation of 7 emotions and 6 desires just now seemed gentle and peaceful, without any danger. But in fact it was a very dangerous test. He was sealed by the 7-colored dazzling light, and his divine soul was immersed in the dreamland. He experienced many realistic and illusory scenes, and encountered too many dangers and difficult choices. This test was related to the 7 emotions and 6 desires. There were greed, anger, infatuation, and also love, hate, and affection. He was determined and was not afraid of any test at all. He resolved the test and destroyed the dreamland all the way. But the most torturous test was about love and affection. Women of all shapes and sizes, including several peerless beauties, all appeared in the realistic illusion. Some of them were people he knew, some he didn't know, and some he loved deeply. He passed the first few tests smoothly. The second last test was about Yun Yao, and he passed it with difficulty. The last test, the Dreamland test, was about Jiku. He suffered serious internal injuries. His internal organs were broken and his divine soul was severely damaged. His consciousness was muddled. Fortunately, he found a way to survive in a hopeless situation. He destroyed the dreamland and woke up. Then he broke the seal of the 7-colored dazzling light and successfully escaped. Now that he had passed the 7 emotions and 6 desires tribulation, his mind and beliefs would be more determined. At the same time, this 7 emotions tribulation also allowed him to see his true self. He found the answer and was no longer confused. The tribulation cloud vortex high in the sky spun faster and began to change. The vortex, as black as ink, showed 2 colors, blazing white and red, intertwining and gathering. A terrifying hurricane blew between heaven and earth, and dense flames drifted in the air. In the canyon ruins within a few hundred miles, countless huge rocks were blown away by the strong wind and smashed into powder by the flames. Such a terrifying power made many onlookers tremble in fear. They hurriedly retreated further away. Not long after, the 8th bolt of lightning condensed in the tribulation cloud vortex. Boom! With a loud bang, the 9,000-foot-long bolt of lightning, which was covered in 5-colored brilliance, fell from the sky and struck Ji Tianxing. At first glance, there was nothing special about that bolt of lightning except for its shocking size. However, the heaven and earth within a 1,000-mile radius were suppressed by an invisible heavenly power. Everyone was afraid and couldn't help but kneel down and worship the heavens. How could an ordinary bolt of lightning bring with it such a terrifying suppressive power? Boom! With a loud bang, the 10,000-foot-tall 5-colored bolt of lightning struck Ji Tianxing and drowned his figure. Within a 500-mile radius, whether it was the ruins, the rocks, or the earth, were all smashed into powder. Chapter 1772. Yia was blasted dozens of miles away by the might of the heavenly thunder and smashed into a ruin. However, he was a 7th-level tribulation transcendence realm powerhouse. He could still withstand the might of the heavenly thunder and was not injured. The 5 bandits under him, on the other hand, were in a miserable state. They had been blasted dozens of miles away by the heavenly thunder. All of them were covered in wounds and blood. Their injuries and sorry state made it seem as if they were the ones who had undergone their own tribulation. After everyone got up from the ruins, they took pills and circulated their energy to heal their injuries while crazily cursing Zhou Xian. Damn little bastard, he actually attracted such a terrifying heavenly thunder. I'm afraid that only a powerhouse like the second master can attract such a powerful heavenly thunder. Little bastard, he caused us to be so miserable. He's dead for sure. He'll definitely be struck into dregs by the heavenly thunder. Yes. He hasn't reached the tribulation transcendence realm yet, but he attracted such a terrifying heavenly thunder. He's definitely going to die. If he can survive this heavenly thunder, I'll twist my head off and kick it like a ball. Granny Jean, the middle-aged woman, and Ronger were also forced back 20 miles by the might of the heavenly thunder. However, Granny Jean's magic power was strong, and she had predicted the terrifying power of the heavenly thunder in advance. She had used a defensive secret technique. Therefore, the three of them were not injured, but their hearts were incomparably shocked and could not calm down for a long time. He actually attracted the 8th heavenly thunder. As expected of a genius that only appears once in 1,000 years. Such a genius has not appeared in our vast divine kingdom for thousands of years. The power of this heavenly thunder is so terrifying. It's even more terrifying than my 6th-level tribulation back then. I really don't know the name of that white-robed young master. If he succeeds today, he will definitely be famous and shock the entire Shenwu continent. The fate of Honorable Sword Martial Lord and Qinyu was not much better than Yiya and the others. Qinyu was caught off guard and was covered in blood from the lightning and fire. He was smashed into the ruins in a sorry state. Honorable Sword Martial Lord was powerful and was not injured by the heavenly thunder. However, he was still in a sorry state. The two of them flew back into the sky and discussed with gloomy expressions. Their hearts were filled with resentment. As for Yunyao, who was hiding in the reverse water sword, she was not affected at all. No matter how strong the heavenly lightning was, it couldn't hurt the reverse water divine sword, much less her. However, the power of the 8th heavenly thunder was beyond her imagination, which made her extremely worried. Tianqing's 8th heavenly thunder is dozens of times more powerful than the heavenly thunder I summoned. Could it be that the heavens are treating him differently and punishing him like this because he controls the power of lightning? Yunyao murmured to herself as she stared at the sky above the ruins, hoping that Zhi Tianqing would be able to resolve the situation safely. A moment later, the lightning and fire that filled the air dissipated, and Zhi Tianqing's figure gradually appeared. He opened his arms and stood in the sky, surrounded by a ball of half-white and half-red lightning fire. He looked up at the sky with his eyes closed. His pale face was filled with pain. Golden, purple and blue lightning kept drilling into his head, bombarding his sea of consciousness and divine soul. Blazing white wind also wrapped around his body, wantonly tearing at his skin and flesh. There were also mysterious crimson and light black flames that crazily drilled into his body from the soles of his feet, burning his meridians and bone marrow. Those mysterious flames even drilled into his chest and burned his internal organs. He was enduring a calamity and pain that no one could imagine, but he was sealed and unable to move. His white robe and inner shirt as well as his long hair were all burned to ashes by the lightning fire. Even though he was naked, he couldn't care less about shame. The extreme pain had already pushed him to the brink of collapse, and his divine soul was blurry. The skin all over his body was charred black, curling up and emitting spirals of black smoke. Astral winds and mysterious flames wrapped around his body, making it impossible for people to see his face and body. The surrounding experts all ignored the fact that he wasn't wearing any clothes, and all showed shocked expressions. Madame Jin's eyes were wide open and light flashed in her pupils. She cried out involuntarily, "It's the great tribulation of wind and fire." Heavens! It's actually the great tribulation of wind and fire that only a 9th-level martial artist who becomes a martial saint will undergo. The middle-aged woman and Ronger were both stunned, and their faces were full of disbelief. They were so shocked that their bodies trembled. How can this be? Only a 9th-level martial artist who is about to become a martial saint will attract the great tribulation of wind and fire. How can that young master attract the great tribulation of wind and fire during his first tribulation? Why is the heavenly law so unfair? It's trying to kill him. The middle-aged woman's face was full of indignation and doubt. Her heart was also tightly clenched and she sympathized with Ji Tianqing. Ronger's pretty face was also full of worry. She frowned and muttered, "The great tribulation of wind and fire is a test that a martial saint must undergo. The ninth heaven divine thunder attacks the divine soul, the astral winds from the outer heavens destroy the body, and the 9 secret flames burn the internal organs and blood marrow. This is the ultimate test of the heavenly tribulation. Since ancient times, countless experts had to experience the great tribulation of wind and fire. However, 95% of them were turned into ashes by the great tribulation of wind and fire. Only those who can successfully pass the great tribulation of wind and fire can transcend the mortal world and become a martial saint. I wonder if that young master can withstand it? If he passes the great tribulation of wind and fire, won't he become a martial saint immediately?" Hundreds of miles away, Yun Yao, who was hiding in the reverse water divine sword, stared at Ji Tianqing with reddened eyes, and a layer of mist covered her eyes. She was the closest to Ji Tianqing so she could see him the clearest. The great tribulation of wind and fire was corroding Ji Tianqing's body, burning him black and smoking, and he almost didn't look human anymore. He was enduring unimaginable pain and his consciousness was blurred. He could collapse and disintegrate at any time and turn into ashes. Yun Yao's mind was connected with his so she could feel his pain. Of course she was extremely worried. She secretly clenched her fists and her fingers pierced her skin. Dark red blood flowed out of her palms, but she didn't feel any pain. After pondering for a while, she resolutely controlled the reverse water divine sword, passing through the rubble and flying towards Ji Tianqing. The heavens are so unfair. They actually sent the great tribulation of wind and fire to Tianqing. I can't just sit by and do nothing. If Tianqing can't pass this tribulation, then I will bear the pain with him and live and die with him. Yun Yao had already made up her mind. She wanted to borrow the power of the reverse water divine sword to help Ji Tianqing pass this tribulation. However, the reverse water divine sword had only flown a few miles away when Ji Tianqing's weak soul consciousness sound transmission entered Yun Yao's mind. "Yao Yao, don't come over. I can withstand it." Ji Tianqing's voice was weak and low, and it was also a little hoarse and intermittent. Obviously, while he was enduring the great tribulation of wind and fire, he took out a little bit of strength with great difficulty to send a sound transmission to Yun Yao. Yun Yao's body immediately stiffened, and she controlled the reverse water divine sword to stop. She hated the heavens for being unfair, for making Ji Tianqing suffer such a painful test and torture. She really wanted to help Ji Tianqing resolve the great tribulation of wind and fire, and save him from this tribulation. However, she remembered Ji Tianqing's warning and understood the consequences of interfering with the heavenly tribulation. Chapter 1773. Just as Yun Yao was feeling anxious, struggling and hesitating, Ji Tianqing, who was above the ruins, finally changed. Originally, he had been burned to charcoal by the great tribulation of wind and fire. He curled up like a shrimp, his whole body emitting black smoke. But now his body was emitting a dense sacred white light. The dense brilliance overflowed from his mouth, nose and eyes. It lit up from the wounds all over his body and quickly enveloped his entire body. This mysterious white light was softer and more sacred than the blazing white of the astral wind. Seemed to contain incredible power. The astral wind, heavenly lightning and 9 secret fire were unable to get close to the mysterious white light and were quickly broken down and devoured. In just 100 breaths of time, the astral wind, secret fire and heavenly lightning that enveloped Ji Tianqing all disappeared. He was wrapped in the dense sacred white light, quietly floating in the sky. His physical body was rapidly healing at a speed visible to the naked eye. His charred skin and flesh were quickly regenerating. The new flesh and skin were sparkling and translucent like jade, as pure as a baby, and revealed traces of sacred golden light. Even on his head, new black hair was quickly growing. It was jet black, shiny and extremely flexible. After another quarter of an hour, he was wrapped in the mysterious white light, and his body was reborn. The great tribulation of wind and fire had finally been resolved. He regained his freedom of movement, slowly stretched his body, and gradually withdrew the sacred white light on the surface of his body. Only then did he realize that his perfect body was exposed to everyone without any concealment. He quickly took out a set of clothes from his interspatial ring and quickly changed them. In the blink of an eye, he returned to his former appearance, becoming a sacred and noble young master in fluttering white clothes. Not far away, Yunyao saw him turn the situation around with her own eyes. She immediately smiled through her tears, wiped away the tears in her eyes and revealed a gratified smile. In the sky further away, several groups of experts who were secretly watching were all dumbfounded on the spot. Yiya and a few miserable bandits seemed to have been petrified. They were shocked and angry. Bright Sword Martial Lord and Qin Yu also looked at Ji Tianxing in a daze, their eyes filled with shock. After a long while, Qin Yu finally came back to his senses and muttered with a sour tone, "Damn brat, he actually turned the danger into safety and passed through the 8th heavenly lightning." However, how could his body be so perfect? Even a man's assets are so strong. It was clear that Ji Tianxing's body had been tempered thousands of times, and had already reached an extremely perfect state, making Qin Yu very jealous. Especially his majestic. It made Qin Yu feel even more ashamed of his inferiority, and a strong sense of inferiority arose in his heart. Qin Yu was well aware that if it were any other woman, they would be attracted to Ji Tianxing and not choose him. When the Honorable Sword Martial Lord heard Qin Yu's mutterings, a hint of anger flashed across his already gloomy old face. "Qin Yu, you are a martial artist. How can you have such filthy thoughts like a mortal? Our Yijian sect's inherited mental cultivation method can only be cultivated to the pinnacle by a virgin boy. If you want to reach the peak of martial arts, it's best to dispel those thoughts of the 7 emotions and 6 desires and wholeheartedly indulge in martial arts." After being reprimanded, Qin Yu immediately lowered his head in dejection and no longer spoke. Granny Jean, Ronger and the other two were too far away from Ji Tianxing. They could only vaguely see his body and did not see anything that was inappropriate to look at. But even so, Ronger's face still turned red and her heart skipped a beat. Ji Tianxing's perfect body only appeared for a short 2 breaths. Although she could only vaguely see his figure, she still admired it and ripples appeared in her heart. At this moment, the middle-aged woman's expression changed and she let out a cry of surprise. "Look, that tribulation cloud vortex. It hasn't dissipated yet." Granny Jean and Ronger were both startled awake and immediately looked up at the sky. Sure enough, they saw that the tribulation cloud vortex was still there. Moreover, the tribulation cloud vortex was still slowly spinning, gradually turning blood red. Seeing this scene, Granny Jean was so excited that her body trembled and her entire old face twitched. The fact that the tribulation cloud hasn't dissipated means that there's still a 9th bolt of lightning. This white-robed young master can actually attract 9 bolts of lightning? According to historical records, in the tens of thousands of years since ancient times, only one person has attracted 9 bolts of lightning and successfully passed through them. Today there's actually a second person who has attracted 9 bolts of lightning. It's really an honor for us to be able to witness it with our own eyes. The middle-aged woman was stunned and asked excitedly, "Granny, the only person you're talking about who attracted 9 bolts of lightning, is it Kenshin from 1,000 years ago?" "Yes." Granny Jean nodded solemnly, her eyes filled with deep reverence. Kenshin was the most dazzling genius in the past 30,000 years. In the end, he ascended to the upper realm and even became the divine king who controlled the galaxy. Only a divine person like him who shocked the past and present could attract 9 bolts of lightning and cause the heavenly Tao to fear him. I didn't expect that in just a short 1,000 years, a second divine person would appear in the world. As she spoke, Granny Jean looked at Ji Tianxing with a solemn expression and whispered, "Ji Yu Rong, or watch carefully. You must remember the details of that young master's tribulation. Today, to be able to watch a divine person go through tribulation is the blessing of 3 lifetimes. If you can comprehend even a little bit from it, it'll be enough for you to enjoy for a lifetime." Rong nodded repeatedly, her pretty face solemn, her eyes filled with anticipation and reverence. The middle-aged woman frowned and asked in a low voice, "Granny, that white-robed young master is indeed a peerless genius, but your evaluation of him is so high, isn't it a little?" Madame Jean turned her head and glanced at her. With a serious expression she said, "Ji Yu, do you know that Divine Lord Taihao, Martial God Tianju and Martial God Luoshui only attracted 8 heavenly tribulations? In tens of thousands of years, Kenshin, the only one who could attract 9 bolts of lightning, became the supreme divine king. Now this young master is also going to attract 9 bolts of lightning. Do you think his future achievements will be better than the 3 martial gods? The middle-aged woman was speechless and couldn't refute. But she thought for a moment and continued, Granny, of course I know that young master is a peerless genius and will definitely reach the martial god realm in the future. But he's too young and hasn't stepped into the tribulation realm. It's hard to say whether he can go through the 9th bolt of lightning. Don't you think you're flattering him by calling him a saint and a divine person now? Granny Jean stared at the middle-aged woman and suddenly smiled. She asked, Jiu, you've cultivated for more than 900 years and are now at the 6th level of the tribulation realm, right? The middle-aged woman didn't understand and could only nod, yes. Chapter 1774. Granny Jin's words made the middle-aged woman's face filled with embarrassment. She instinctively did not believe these words and could not accept such an evaluation. However, Granny Jean had only passed the great tribulation of wind and fire 80 years ago and reached the martial sage realm. She had no way to question or refute the judgment of a martial sage expert. After a moment of silence, she sighed with a complicated expression and cupped her hands. Granny Jiu understands. Granny Jean did not say anything else. She turned her head to look at Ji Tianxing in the distance and said leisurely, In this world there are always a few geniuses who are as dazzling as the sun and moon, illuminating the past and present. Geniuses of that level are not something you and I can imagine. The middle-aged woman nodded silently. Ronger also nodded repeatedly. Her eyes looking at Ji Tianxing became even brighter. At the same time, the tribulation cloud vortex high in the sky finally turned blood red. Boom! Following the sound of thunder that resounded through the heavens and earth, a blood-red lightning bolt that was 10,000 feet long descended from the sky and struck towards Ji Tianxing. That blood-red lightning bolt was as mighty as a giant dragon, but it also revealed a mysterious and strange aura. In just an instant, the blood-red lightning bolt struck Ji Tianxing and enveloped his figure. There was no scene of the heavens collapsing and the earth cracking. The ruins were also safe and sound and were not struck by lightning. That 10,000 feet long blood-red lightning bolt had actually all poured into Ji Tianxing's body, causing his body to freeze in midair as if he had been petrified. He was like a stone statue standing proudly and upright in the sky, not moving at all. Such a strange scene caused Yiya, the bandit's bright sword martial lord, and Qingyu to reveal looks of astonishment. How is this possible? That brat attracted the 9th bolt of lightning. Shouldn't it destroy the heavens and earth? It's too damn strange. When this bolt of lightning struck down, it didn't even break a rock. When the heavenly lightning struck down, that terrifying heavenly might was like the end of the world. I didn't expect it to be a bluff. The middle-aged woman and Ronger also revealed a look of deep doubt. They could not understand what was going on. However, with their previous experience, both of them had a premonition that there was definitely a big problem with the seemingly harmless heavenly lightning. Therefore, both of them turned to look at Madame Jean, hoping to get an answer. Madame Jean frowned and pondered for a moment. Then she said, This 9th thunderbolt is no ordinary thunderbolt. It should be the legendary Inner Demon Tribulation. The so-called Inner Demon Tribulation is the heavenly Tao's final test for unparalleled geniuses. The middle-aged woman and Ronger listened carefully to Granny Jin's explanation. They felt that it was incredible and eye-opening. At the same time, 50 miles away from Ji Tianxing, Yunyao, who was hiding in the reverse water divine sword, was also full of worry. She stared at Ji Tianxing and thought to herself, I only triggered 8 bolts of heavenly thunder, but Tianxing managed to trigger 9 bolts of heavenly thunder just like Kenshin back then. Now he is also facing the inner demon tribulation. I wonder if his inner demon tribulation is the same as mine. Back then I saw the demon race in the inner demon tribulation and obtained many of Goddess Yao Guang's memories. Tianxing's inner demon tribulation definitely can't avoid the demon race in Kenshin, right? Thinking of this, she secretly prayed in her heart, hoping that Ji Tianxing could pass it smoothly. Ji Tianxing's physical body was wrapped in a ball of bloody light, suspended motionlessly in the sky. And his soul had already fallen into the inner demon tribulation. In the depths of his soul, a very realistic scene emerged, sinking him into it and unable to extricate himself. On a grayish-brown wasteland, the flames of war were burning, and smoke signals were drifting into the sky. The endless demon race army formed a boundless black sea. Under the leadership of numerous giant demons, they were bravely charging forward. Many human soldiers, as well as the armies and martial artists of various races, were resisting the demon race army's rampage with hearts full of indignation and fear. The entire wasteland was covered in blood and fire. Heaven and earth were filled with shouts, screams, and the rumbling sounds of magic spells colliding. The soldiers and martial artists of various races were constantly killed by the ferocious demon race, falling into pools of blood in pieces. Soldiers and martial artists fell down one after another like wheat being cut down. On this wasteland battlefield, life was inferior to even grass, lowly to the extreme. Before long, the demon race army defeated the soldiers of various races. Like a black tide, they surged to the end of the wasteland, drowning that majestic city. In the ancient city, millions of people were brutally slaughtered without any strength to resist. Flames of war rose in the city, blood flowed like rivers and bones were strewn all over the ground. It was like purgatory on earth. Xianxia was dressed in a white robe dyed red with blood. Holding the pitch-black and ice-cold burial of heaven, he was standing high in the sky covered with gray clouds, fighting with several giant demons. The bodies of those giant demons were as majestic as mountains. With a raise of their hands, they could release magic spells that could destroy heaven and earth. Xianxia was bathed in blood, fighting fiercely. The golden wings on his back had already dimmed. His face was covered in blood, his magic power was empty and he could barely hold on. Deep grief and helplessness filled his heart, causing him to roar at the sky. The few trolls laughed hideously and cursed in a mocking manner. Xianxia, how can a little bastard like you stop the advance of my race? A mantis trying to stop a chariot. You overestimate yourself. Little worm, kneel down and beg for surrender now. Perhaps the ancestor will give you a dignified death. Anger made Xianxia crazy. He waved his divine sword recklessly, attacking those giant demons. However, the giant demons waved their huge copper hammers, long sabers and other weapons, sending him flying back in 2 or 3 moves. His right arm was chopped off and he fell into the ruins, covered in blood, on the verge of death. However, he was still unyielding. Holding the sword of burial of heaven in his left hand, he stood up shakily. At this moment, those giant demons surrounded him, but they were not in a hurry to attack. A series of earth-shattering noises gradually came from afar. The giant demons looked at the wasteland, waiting in awe. Xianxia also looked up at the wasteland. He saw a majestic figure that was 3,000 feet tall striding over. That pitch-black figure stood tall, as if it was a god from the antiquity age. Its entire body was shrouded in purple demonic light, and its body was extremely sturdy. It also had 6 scarlet eyes, 6 thick arms and 8 broad wings. Xianxia recognized it at a glance. It was the ancestor fiend celestial. Bam, bam, bam. As the ancestor fiend celestial's heavy footsteps sounded, the entire wasteland trembled. After a while it stopped in front of Xianxia. 6 huge scarlet eyes stared down at Xianxia from above. After sizing him up for a while, the ancestor fiend celestial sneered and said in a mocking tone, "Xianxia, you really disappoint me. The 3 martial gods are no different from ants in my eyes. I originally thought that you, who once controlled the galaxy and ruled thousands of gods, as the divine king of the 9 heavens, would be able to exchange a few moves with me." Chapter 1775. The ancestor fiend celestial looked down at Xianxia. His expression and tone were full of contempt. Xianxia's heart was burning with rage, surging with violent killing intent. However, his strength was weak and one of his arms had been chopped off. He was already at the end of his rope. He looked up angrily at the ancestor fiend celestial. While emitting killing intent, he was also puzzled. He actually called me Xianxia? How can this be? He is an ancient fiend celestial from 30,000 years ago, while Xianxia is an unparalleled expert from 1,000 years ago. The two of them have no connection at all. Just as he was feeling puzzled, the ancestor fiend celestial slowly raised his left palm, releasing a few pitch-black cold light blades, which stabbed down from the sky. Swish, swish, swish. Xianxia wanted to dodge, but he could not. He was stabbed by the light blades and fell to the ground with blood spurting out from his body. A few bloody holes appeared on his chest, back and legs, and the bones inside could be clearly seen. A heart-wrenching pain spread throughout his body, causing him to convulse and curl up. Kakik. The ancestor fiend celestial laughed sinisterly and said in a disdainful tone, "Indeed, a piece of trash that can't even withstand a single blow. What a disappointment. I don't understand. Just based on your abilities, how can you protect this continent and its billions of people?" As he said that, the ancestor fiend celestial moved his finger again, and a blood light covered the sky. The dark red blood light condensed into light blades, and like a rain of arrows, they rained down and enveloped Xianxia. Swish swish swish. The blood light flashed and the sky collapsed. Xianxia was also pierced into a sieve by the blood light blades, and his body was covered with hideous wounds and bloody holes, with blood gushing out like a fountain. Furthermore, his body had been chopped into two and mixed with the blood mud, looking extremely miserable. After suffering such heavy injuries, Xianxia was in so much pain that he wished he was dead. His soul was also in pain and his consciousness was blurry. Once his consciousness fainted, he would fall into a deep sleep and might never wake up again. He tried his best to hold on and roared in his heart, "No. I can't die, no matter what, I can't fall. Even if I die, I will drag the ancestral devil god down with me." Relying on his strong willpower, he managed to hold on and didn't faint on the spot. The two halves of his body wriggled gently and slowly gathered together. He wanted to reconstruct his body. Seeing how tenacious his life force was, the ancestor devil god couldn't help but grin. Ants will always be ants. No matter how humiliating and painful it is, it still has to drag out an ignoble existence. However, I will not give you a chance. Accept your destruction in despair." The ancestral demon god sneered as he raised his left foot that was as large as a mountain and stomped down. The pitch-black giant foot descended from the sky like a huge mountain. It was about to trample Xianxia into powder. At the moment of life and death, Xianxia tried his best to look up at the sky and roared unyieldingly, "No. This can't be true. I will never lose to you." Even though the illusion was so real that it was hard to tell if it was real or fake. However, he suddenly realized that this was definitely not true. The ancestral demon god had already recovered to become a god, but he still had the strength of a tribulation transcendence realm cultivator. This was impossible. The difference in strength between the two of them couldn't be so great. "This called me Kenshin. Yes, I am not Xianxia. I am Kenshin, the divine king that ascends to the 9 heavens and rules over 10,000 gods." Xianxia let out a furious roar. Every drop of blood, every pore and every hair in his body began to burn. The two halves of his body ignited with golden flames and quickly fused into a ball. In the next moment, the golden sacred flames condensed and formed into an 8 feet tall, holy and dignified man in a white robe. The ancestral demon god's giant foot also stomped down on him, causing an earth-shattering explosion. Boom! Following the deafening explosion, Xianxia's figure was drowned out. The ground within a radius of 100 miles was crushed by the gigantic foot, and a gigantic abyss appeared. However, after the ancestral demon god moved his foot away, he looked at the ground in astonishment. A young man in a white robe was holding a pitch-black divine sword and standing majestically above the abyss. This person was tall and had a handsome and resolute face. His eyes were as bright as the stars. His long hair was tied up with a green hairband and a silver belt was tied around his waist. He wore a pair of simple black cloth shoes. At first glance he looked very plain. However, he exuded a holy and dignified aura that could not be blasphemed. He was also surrounded by formless divine power. He was Kenshin. The ancestral demon god looked at Kenshin before lowering his head to look at the back of his foot. He saw that there was a huge bloody hole in his foot. The pitch-black demonic blood was gushing out like a fountain and spilling into the abyss. The ancestral demon god was instantly enraged. He raised his fists and punched out with a monstrous black light towards Kenshin. "You reptile, go to hell." Kenshin looked at the ancestral demon god indifferently. His left hand was behind his back and his right hand was holding the sword of burial of heaven as he slashed out 3 heaven-splitting swords. Bam bam bam. The 3 heaven-splitting swords with resplendent golden light slashed at the ancestral demon god. He was sent flying backwards. His left ankle was severed and there was a huge bloody hole in his right leg and chest. After flying for 100 miles, it finally smashed into the wasteland with a loud boom, shattering the ground into pieces. Before he could get up, Kenshin had already teleported 100 miles away and chased after him with his sword. "Evil demons, everyone has the right to kill you," Kenshin shouted emotionlessly as he swung his sword at the ancestral demon god. White Tiger Sacred Sword. The huge sword cut through the sky and brought along an illusory white tiger shadow, instantly engulfing the ancestral demon god. Bam! The ancestral demon god's right leg was severed again. Countless wounds appeared all over his body as dark purple demonic blood spurted out. The sudden reversal of the battle situation and the heart-wrenching pain made the ancestral demon god furious. He roared at the top of his lungs. "Ah! You despicable worm, you ant-like thing, how dare you bully this god? This god will fight it out with you." As he roared, the ancestral demon god launched a counterattack. Blood, light and black fog covered the sky and covered a radius of 1,000 miles. Kenshin was fearless. He used the Big Dipper constellation steps and held the Sword of Burial of Heaven in his hand. He used a superb sword technique that had reached perfection. No matter how much blood, light and demonic aura approached him, they were blocked by the sword light and could not get close. The two of them fought in the sky above the wilderness for a full 15 minutes before the battle came to an end. The sky within a radius of 1,000 miles had been shattered and densely packed cracks appeared in the void. The wilderness had turned into ruins and was filled with ravines and holes. Kenshin was still in his snow-white robe and was not injured at all. As for the ancestral demon god, 5 of his arms and wings had been severed. His legs had been blasted into smithereens. Chapter 1776. After the ancestor demon god was defeated and fled, the millions of demon race troops also retreated like the tide. Kenshin stood quietly in the sky and closed his eyes, revealing a look of pain. The power in his body quickly dissipated, and a strong sense of weakness and exhaustion attacked him, causing him to immediately fall into a coma. Swoosh! In a daze, Ji Tianxing's consciousness gradually returned to him. Although his body and consciousness were still very tired, he slowly opened his eyes and saw the scene in front of him clearly. He was surrounded by boundless darkness, and there was only a path shining with stars under his feet. Upon closer inspection, the straight and wide path was surprisingly formed by the convergence of thousands of stars, like a silver-white waterfall. Ji Tianxing looked around and discovered that there was nothing in the dark void other than the path of stars. He immediately understood that he was still in the dream realm, and the mental demon tribulation had not ended. He followed the path of stars under his feet and walked forward into the depths of the void. Time in the void seemed to pass extremely slowly, and the scenery around him never changed. He did not know how long he had been walking for, until he saw a towering platform at the end of the path of stars. Therefore he quickened his pace and rushed over, curiously sizing up the platform. The huge platform seemed to be formed by stars, and it was gold and silver in color, containing a majestic divine aura. The path of stars was connected to the platform, and there were a total of 9,999 steps on the platform, which was a total of 10,000 feet high. Ji Tianxing came closer and after observing for a while he stepped onto the steps. He clearly saw that every step was engraved with dense seal characters, recording a vast amount of complicated information. There was the truth of martial arts as well as the world of one's home country, as well as the wind and clouds of heaven and earth, as well as the vast and boundless sea of stars. However, he could not understand most of the content as it was too profound and bizarre. Moreover, his attention was not on his feet. He could vaguely see that at the top of the platform, there was a white figure standing tall. Not long after, he stepped on nearly 10,000 steps and finally arrived at the top of the platform. In front of him was a platform with a radius of 300 meters. The ground was as bright as jade, and it was suffused with the brilliance of the stars. An 8-foot-tall figure in a white robe was standing quietly on the high platform. With his hands behind his back and his back facing Ji Tianxing, he stared into the vast void as if he was thinking about something. Ji Tianxing was no stranger to this unique figure. Kenshin. He raised his eyebrows and couldn't help but call out. The white-robed figure was awakened. He ended his contemplation and slowly turned around. His face was handsome and resolute, and his eyes were as deep and vast as the starry sky. He wore a green hairband on his head, a silver jade belt around his waist, and a pair of black cloth shoes on his feet. It was undoubtedly Kenshin. He looked at Ji Tianxing calmly and said in a leisurely tone, "I have waited for 1,000 years. You have finally come." Ji Tianxing frowned and looked at him in confusion. "What do you mean?" Kenshin didn't explain. He looked at him deeply and said in a gratified tone, "In a short 25 years, you were able to attract the heavenly tribulation. It seems that my painstaking efforts were not in vain. With such an unprecedented growth speed, you will definitely shock the universe and make all the gods bow down to you." Kenshin muttered to himself and said in a regretful tone, "It's a pity that my memories haven't been fully awakened and my potential hasn't been fully stimulated. I am still ignorant to this day." Ji Tianxing was even more confused when he heard Kenshin's words. He couldn't help but ask, "Senior Kenshin, could it be that you arranged for me to receive your inheritance 1,000 years ago? What is the relationship between you and me?" The sword god was startled by his question, and then an expression of not knowing whether to laugh or cry appeared on his face. "Sai, I'm really crying because of you, because of my own stupidity. Now that things have come to this, don't you have an answer in your heart?" Many images of Kenshin appeared in Ji Tianxing's memories. And now this was the first time he saw Kenshin smile. Of course, Kenshin's words shocked him even more. "You mean I am you?" Ji Tianxing's pupils constricted and he stared at Kenshin. His heart was in his throat. Kenshin frowned slightly. After thinking for a while he shook his head. "Your words are both correct and incorrect. I am only me and I am also the current you. But you are not only you." These two sentences were so specious that it was hard to fathom them. Ji Tianxing frowned and thought for a while before he came to a realization. "I understand now. You are Kenshin and you reincarnated into me. And I am not only Kenshin but also Ji Tianxing." Kenshin revealed a gratified expression and nodded slightly. "That's right, that's exactly the case. I am Kenshin and I only have Kenshin's memories. And you are not only me but also the #1 prodigy Ji Tianxing. You are even more monstrous than me." After receiving Kenshin's confirmation, Ji Tianxing finally unlocked the shackles in his heart and pushed aside the layers of fog. He looked at Kenshin with a burning gaze and asked impatiently, "You have already fallen for 1,000 years. How can you talk to me across space?" Kenshin knew that he was full of doubts and explained, "As the king of gods, not only is I powerful, but I also have the ability to change the heavens and change the earth. Before I fell, I had already prepared the corresponding plan and was only waiting for my rebirth 1,000 years later. I did something to the heavenly tribulation lightning. You will only understand all of this when you undergo the tribulation." Ji Tianxing raised his eyebrows and praised in disbelief. "As expected of the king of gods, you can actually do something to the heavenly tribulation." Kenshin said with a calm expression, "Praising yourself like this doesn't seem too modest." Ji Tianxing smiled and continued to ask, "I want to know, since you have already become the king of gods, why did you fall? And why did you fall?" Kenshin's eyes dimmed and he said in a low voice, "The path of martial arts and the path of godhood are endless. There is always a higher mountain. As for the mystery of my fall, it is still too early for you to investigate it. When you ascend to the upper realm and become strong enough, you will naturally find the answer." Ji Tianxing nodded and asked again, "Then what secrets are hidden in the tombs of Yin and Yang that you left behind?" "A secret that can make the entire world go crazy," Kenshin answered. Ji Tianxing asked again, "In Kenshin's tomb, I found a super formation that seemed to have been passed down from ancient times. What kind of formation is that?" Kenshin said in a serious tone, "The god-slaying sword formation, a relic from the desolate era. I have studied it for many years and still have not been able to fully understand it." Ji Tianxing had countless questions in his heart and wanted to ask Kenshin more. However, Kenshin raised his hand to stop him and said in a serious tone, "Whether it is martial arts or recovering your past memories, you have to do it step by step. You cannot be impatient, otherwise there will be a great disaster. I do not have much time left. I will help you awaken a part of your memories first." Chapter 1777. Zhou The white light entered Ji Tianqing's forehead and quickly integrated into his sea of consciousness. Vast and mighty information poured into his divine soul like a surging tide. He was dizzy from the impact and his consciousness was a little blurred. He could only sit cross-legged on the high platform and refine the memories. Kenshin looked at him faintly and murmured in a low and sonorous voice, 100 tribulations, 1,000 tribulations since ancient times, I will defy the heavens. After 100 years I will definitely make a comeback and reach the peak again. As his voice fell, his body also turned into a ray of mysterious white light and entered Ji Tianqing's body and soon merged with it. The surrounding void returned to darkness and calmness, and the stars on the high platform were still shining. Ji Tianqing was unaware of all this. He was immersed in his sea of consciousness and focused on refining Kenshin's memories. In the sea of fire in the flaming mountain, half a day had passed, and the tribulation cloud vortex above the ruins had not dissipated yet. Ji Tianqing, dressed in a white robe, was still wrapped in the bloody light and quietly suspended in the sky. Dozens of miles away, Yunyao was hiding in the reverse water divine sword. She was already a little anxious from waiting. She looked at Ji Tianqing with worried eyes and murmured secretly, half a day has passed. Why hasn't Ji Tianqing succeeded in passing the tribulation? Could it be that he has encountered some trouble? There are already several groups of powerhouses watching. If the tribulation doesn't end, I'm afraid there will be unexpected problems. On the other side, in the sky hundreds of miles away from Ji Tianqing, Grandma Jean, the middle-aged woman, and Ronger were also waiting anxiously, showing a puzzled look. Ronger asked Grandma Jean worriedly, Grandma, that young master's inner demon tribulation has been going on for half a day. Will he be okay? Grandma Jean clenched her golden walking stick and said with a solemn face, Grandma has not passed the inner demon tribulation. How can you know the mystery? However, an inner demon tribulation lasting for half a day is really unusual. I'm afraid that young master is in trouble. Hearing her words, Ronger's eyes became more and more worried and her mood became heavier. The middle-aged woman hurriedly comforted her. Don't worry. That young master is comparable to the Kenshin. He will definitely be able to turn misfortune into blessing. I hope so. Ronger nodded and prayed silently. Night Crow and the bandits were hiding in the sea of fire in the southwest corner of the ruins. Everyone stared at Ji Tianqing, who was standing on top of the ruins. They were already filled with anxiety and impatience. The bandits urged Night Crow telepathically like ants on a hot pan. Second Master, that brat hasn't moved for a long time. Are we still going to wait here? That's right, Second Master. Our brothers have all suffered heavy injuries. We just want to get rid of that brat as soon as possible and find a place to heal. The longer we stay in the sea of fire, the more our magic power will be consumed and our injuries will worsen. If that kid drags on for another half a day, we won't have much of our strength left. Second Master, you have to make a decision quickly. Wasting time like this is not the way to go. How could Yi not be anxious and worried? But in order to be cautious, he had endured until now. After being urged by the bandits, he gradually lost his patience. The First Master sent me a message earlier. They have already found the hiding place of the glazed fire dragon. Many powerhouses have surrounded the lair of the glazed fire dragon. I'm afraid they will take action soon. The First Master urged us to rush over to help as soon as possible. We can't delay our work. Night Crow said in a low voice. With a dignified expression, he ordered, Now that things have come to this, we really can't wait any longer. That brat is going through the tribulation. He can't even protect himself and has no power to resist. You guys go now and kill him as fast as you can. If he succeeds, he will become the #1 genius of the continent. It will be difficult for us to get rid of him then. Hearing this order, the 5 bandits were stunned. They looked at each other, but no one dared to agree. Second Master, are we going to rush over and kill him just like that? If we do it now, we will definitely enter the range of the tribulation. Even if we can kill that brat, we will be killed by the tribulation. Outsiders can't interfere with the tribulation. Otherwise, they will be punished by the heavens. This is the consensus of the martial arts world. Seeing that the bandits were full of hesitation and didn't dare to take action, Night Crow suddenly became angry. Bastard! You dare to disobey my order? Outsiders can't interfere with the tribulation. It means that they can't help the person going through the tribulation resist the heavenly thunder. You are going to kill that brat, not help him go through the tribulation. How can you be punished by the heavens? Since I sent you to do it, I will definitely not let you die. After hearing Night Crow's explanation, the bandits' doubts were dispelled a little. After a while, the 5 bandits used the secret method of invisibility and quietly attacked Ji Tianxing. Their movements were quite hidden. They scattered and approached from different directions. The tribulation cloud vortex in the sky had been rotating calmly at a uniform speed. There was no strange phenomenon at all. This made them feel relieved. They no longer had any worries. When they were only tens of thousands of feet away from Ji Tianxing, they waved their weapons and used their most powerful killing moves to attack Ji Tianxing. Clear Wind Moon Slashing Blade. 10 Floating Cloud Imperial Swords. Golden Dragon Breaking Dawn. 10,000 swords facing the sky. With a few angry shouts, dazzling saber lights and sword shadows appeared in the sky, blotting out the sky and the sun. In an instant, hundreds of magic lights and shadows drowned Ji Tianxing's figure. And he was still wrapped in the bloody light, floating motionlessly in the sky, unaware of all this. Of course, even if he sensed the danger, it was useless. He was sealed by the dark red bloody light and couldn't move at all. Dozens of miles away, Yunyao suddenly saw several bandits attacking Ji Tianxing. Her face suddenly changed and her eyes surged with murderous intent. "No!" she shouted with grief and indignation. She no longer cared to hide and rushed out with the reverse water divine sword. Although she couldn't save Ji Tianxing in time, she couldn't do anything. She swore to protect Ji Tianxing even if she had to die. In the distance, Madame Jean Rong and the other 2 suddenly saw a few bandits appear, and their expressions changed drastically. The 3 of them were filled with worry and indignation, and they hated those bandits incomparably. However, they were too far away. Even if they wanted to save Ji Tianxing, it was impossible. On the other hand, Bright Sword Martial Lord and Qin Yu had always been depressed. Suddenly seeing this scene, the 2 of them were surprised, but at the same time, they also felt a sense of schadenfreude. Hee, as expected, a tall tree attracts the wind. That kid is too heaven-defying. He finally provoked an enemy. What a pity. A peerless genius who can trigger 9 bolts of heavenly lightning is going to fall like this. The 2 of them secretly laughed, thinking that Ji Tianxing was definitely going to die. But at this moment, the tribulation cloud vortex in the sky suddenly changed. The tribulation cloud that was originally rotating at a uniform speed suddenly lit up with a dazzling golden light, condensing into a few bolts of lightning that could split heaven and earth. Boom. Chapter 1778. The resplendent golden heavenly lightning struck down fiercely with the power to destroy the heavens and the earth. The number of heavenly lightning was neither more nor less. There were exactly 5 bolts and they struck the 5 bandits respectively. This scene caused Yiya, who was observing the situation from afar, to change his expression in shock. Granny Jean Rong and the other 2 were filled with joy, revealing expressions of relief. As for Bright Sword Martial Lord and Qin Yu, their faces were filled with astonishment, completely unable to understand. The 5 bandits sensed that something was wrong, and their faces immediately turned ashen. They were terrified and desperate to the extreme. They were all scared out of their wits and immediately wanted to turn around and run away. Unfortunately, the brilliant heavenly might enveloped them, suppressing them like a towering mountain, making it difficult for them to move an inch and unable to dodge at all. Kaboom! Following a few earth-shattering thunderclaps, 5 golden heavenly lightning bolts exploded with a loud bang. The dazzling golden light enveloped the sky for 100 miles. An endless amount of gravel and dust rose up like a mushroom cloud, spreading in all directions. The peerlessly terrifying impact naturally affected Yunyao. She had just arrived nearby when she was sent flying by the violent shockwave. Fortunately, she had been staying in the water reverse divine sword, and the heavenly lightning could not do anything to the divine sword. The 5 bandits' fates were extremely miserable. They were blasted into pieces by the heavenly lightning on the spot, and their bodies turned into dust. 2 of them were relatively lucky. Only their bodies were destroyed and their souls were severely injured, but they tenaciously survived. The other 3 were more unlucky. Not only were their bodies destroyed, but their souls were also destroyed on the spot and they were completely dead. These 3 bandits had transcended their own heavenly tribulation, but they died under someone else's heavenly tribulation. This kind of death was truly very novel. When the smoke, dust, and lightning dissipated, the two heavily injured souls fled into the distance in panic. Even if they disobeyed Yi Ya's orders and were sentenced to death by Yi Ya, they couldn't care less. However, things didn't go as they wished. They fled in fear, but they neglected one thing. Xianxia had companions. Whoosh! An icy blue sword light suddenly shot out from the sea of fire and instantly pierced a ball of divine soul. Boom! With a dull explosion, the soul exploded on the spot and was shattered by the water reverse divine sword. This person had the strength of the 5th level of the Tribulation Transcendence realm, but he was seriously injured and his strength was extremely weak. How could this person survive being hit by the water reverse divine sword when he was caught off guard? When the other soul saw its companion being killed, it was scared out of its wits and desperately accelerated to escape. But it was futile. Since Yun Yao's killing intent had already been aroused, there was no way she would leave anyone alive. Whoosh! She then controlled the reverse water divine sword and instantly traversed 10 miles in the sky, killing her way to the back of the divine soul. The reverse water sword emitted a sky full of cold light. It condensed into a giant sword that was hundreds of meters long. Carrying with it unparalleled prowess, it violently slashed down. Another muffled explosion rang out, and the severely injured divine soul was also shattered by the sword light, disintegrating into wisps of qi that scattered into the sea of fire. 3 bandits were killed by the heavenly tribulation, and 2 by Yun Yao's divine sword. Yi Ya, who was in the distance, rushed over to rescue them after realizing that something was wrong. But he was too far away. Even if he teleported continuously, he couldn't stop Yun Yao. Damn it! That damned woman has been hiding nearby all this time. Yi Ya witnessed the death of his 5 subordinates with his own eyes. The anger in his heart was almost off the charts. He recognized the water reverse divine sword and knew that it was Yun Yao's magic treasure. He hated Yun Yao to the core. Despicable bitch. In that case, I'll kill you first and then deal with that brat. Yi Ya immediately had this thought when he saw the water reverse divine sword flying across the sky. Xianxia was in the middle of his tribulation and had no time to care about other things. Although Yun Yao had the divine sword, she was alone after all and only had the strength of the 1st level of the Tribulation Transcendence realm. Therefore Yi Ya decided to kill Yun Yao first. After snatching the divine sword, he would kill Xianxia. With a flash of brilliance in his palm, a black feather fan appeared. With a shake of his black robe, he rushed toward the water reverse divine sword as fast as a stream of light. He waved the black feather fan and shot out a black light that blotted out the sky. Black wings split the sky. Whoosh 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 whoosh. Thousands of pitch-black and cold light blades flew out of the black feather fan. They combined in pairs and rushed toward the water reverse divine sword like pairs of black light wings. The black light cut through the sky and suppressed the heavenly fire in the sky. In the blink of an eye, the black light that filled the sky surrounded the water reverse divine sword and sealed the open space within a radius of 10,000 feet. Hundreds of black light wings spun crazily, desperately trying to kill the water reverse divine sword. The blade-like black wings wantonly collided and cut the water reverse divine sword, producing crisp, ding-ding-dang-dang-dang sounds that lingered in the ears. However, the water reverse divine sword was a divine weapon. It was indestructible and invincible. Even if it was strangled by hundreds of black wings, the divine sword was unscathed. Even the layer of icy blue light on the surface was not defeated. On the contrary, those black light wings were constantly shattered by the divine sword. However, these black wings were very strange and changeable. Even if they were shattered into pieces, the black wings could quickly split and recombine to form more and sharper light blades. In just 100 breaths of time, the hundreds of black wings were all shattered and turned into tens of thousands of black light blades. So many black light blades formed a light shield that covered an area of 10 miles. It was like a ceiling formation that suppressed the water reverse divine sword. Although the water reverse divine sword was very powerful, Yun Yao's strength was 6 realms lower than Yi Ya's. She controlled the water reverse divine sword and used all her strength to break out of the encirclement, but she still could not escape. After the light shield formed by the black light blades was shattered and pierced, Yi Ya could always repair it immediately. The water-reversed divine sword was so indestructible that it made him even more certain that this was a treasure sword above the divine grade. He became more and more excited and swore to snatch the treasure sword. After attacking for a long time without success, he used a divine soul secret technique. He used the black light blades to release divine soul power and crazily attacked Yunyao. Yunyao hid in the water-reversed divine sword. Her divine soul was also affected and could not use her full strength. Her counterattack became weaker and weaker and her situation became more and more dangerous. In the distance, Grandma Jean and the other two bright sword martial lord and Qinyu all saw this scene. Everyone secretly stared at Yiya and the water-reversed divine sword, not understanding what was going on. Unknowingly, another quarter of an hour passed. Yunyao's divine soul suffered a heavy blow. Her consciousness became more and more blurry and her counterattack became weaker and weaker. With just the water-reversed divine sword, she was no longer able to resist Yiya's various strange methods. Not long after, when her divine soul fell into a coma, she was about to be captured by Yiya and be at his mercy. But at this time, the tribulation cloud vortex in the sky gradually began to dissipate. The dark red blood light that wrapped around Ji Tianxing also cracked into pieces and quickly dissipated in the sky. Ji Tianxing, who was motionless like a stone statue, finally regained consciousness and slowly opened his eyes. Without a doubt, his heavenly tribulation had ended. The moment he opened his eyes, his entire body burst out with a majestic domineering aura that suppressed the heavens and earth. 2 rays of golden light shot out from his eyes that were as bright as stars. Chapter 1779. When the tribulation clouds dissipated, they turned into a divine golden light that covered the sky and earth, pouring into Ji Tianxing's body. His body swelled violently and he immediately turned into a 10-foot-tall giant, covered in golden light. His white robe was like snow, his long hair fluttered, his arms hung by his side, and his body burst out with a domineering aura. He walked out of the divine golden light, with the sky above his head and the earth beneath his feet, as if he controlled the heavens and earth. In his deep and cold eyes, purple, blue and golden lightning flashed, changing between life and death, containing supreme divine power. At this moment, although he was not a god, he surpassed all the gods in the world. His body stood proudly between heaven and earth, looking up at the sky. His face was cold and his eyes were indifferent as he murmured, "The heavens can't cover my eyes. This earth can't bury my heart. The gods and demons of the heavens will also vanish." As his voice fell, the divine golden light that enveloped his body quickly converged. The golden light was the reward given by the heavenly Tao after he successfully transcended the tribulation. His injuries had been healed and his strength had reached its peak and limit. His entire person had been reborn and reached a new realm. Dozens of miles away, Yiya was controlling tens of thousands of black light blades, crazily attacking the reverse water sword and Yunyao. Suddenly seeing Ji Tianxing wake up and feeling Ji Tianxing's powerful aura, his face immediately changed, and his eyes revealed a strong sense of fear. Damn it! That kid really succeeded in transcending the heavenly tribulation. Strength. His aura. How can it be so powerful? Yiya couldn't believe that Ji Tianxing had just stepped into the first layer of the tribulation realm, and his strength and aura were actually on par with him. This was simply a miracle. In the sky further away, the Honorable Sword Martial Lord and Qinyu stared at Ji Tianxing, their eyes extremely complicated. Shock, disbelief and strong jealousy filled the hearts of the two. Granny Jean, Jiyu and Rong revealed a look of surprise and relief. Especially Granny Jean and Rong, they both breathed a sigh of relief as if a heavy burden had been lifted from their shoulders. Just as Madame Jean had said, it was their honor and fortune to be able to witness a peerless genius transcend the 9th heaven tribulation with their own eyes. They would never be able to see another monstrous genius like Ji Tianxing in their lifetime. At that moment, Jiyu's eyes suddenly widened, revealing a look of anticipation. "Look, that gentleman is making his move." Madame Jean and Ronger quickly looked over and saw a scene that they would never forget. Ji Tianxing stepped into the sky, holding the 80-foot-long burial of Heaven sword in his hand. His robe fluttered in the wind as he charged towards Yiya. Shua! With a flash of white light, he teleported 40 miles away and appeared behind Yiya. Then with his left hand behind his back and his right hand holding the sword of burial of heaven, he slashed out fiercely. Boom. Suddenly the pitch-black ice-cold sword burst forth with three-colored lightning, condensing into three giant swords that slashed towards Yiya. The golden, purple, and blue heavenly lightning that had appeared in the heavenly tribulation before actually appeared again and was used in his sword technique. Yiya had already sensed that something was wrong, so he retreated in advance and narrowly avoided the lightning attack. However, the cage formed by tens of thousands of black light blades was hit by the three giant lightning swords, and a series of muffled loud noises burst out. Bang! 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 In the deafening loud noise, the black light cage was torn apart, bursting into pieces and scattering on the ground. The secret technique that Yiya had painstakingly used was destroyed by Ji Tianqing just like that. He stood in the distant sky with a horrified expression and thought to himself with lingering fear, "Damn little bastard, you can actually control heavenly lightning? Fortunately, I dodged in time or else I would be in trouble." Whoosh. At that moment, an icy blue brilliance flew out from the black light fragments and stopped beside Ji Tianqing. With a flash of icy blue light, Yun Yao appeared in front of Ji Tianqing and looked at him with concern. "Tianqing, you finally passed the heavenly tribulation successfully. Are you hurt anywhere?" Yun Yao looked at Ji Tianqing and asked with concern. Ji Tianqing looked at her gently and shook his head. "I'm not hurt and my strength has returned to its peak. You don't have to worry." Yun Yao was relieved and all the worry and anxiety in her heart dissipated. She looked at Ji Tianqing with burning eyes and said hesitantly, "Tianqing, you have also reached the first tier of the crossing calamity realm. You seem to have been reborn. I feel like you have become a different person, especially your aura. Is it related to the awakening of your soul memory?" Yun Yao could certainly guess that Ji Tianqing had become so sacred, dignified, and cold. It must be related to Kenshin. Ji Tianqing did not deny it and nodded. Yes. After getting a positive answer, Yun Yao showed a gratified look and felt much more relaxed. At this moment, Yiya took the opportunity to launch a sneak attack. He waved his black feather fan and shot out an overwhelming black light. Claw of Annihilation. The endless black light quickly condensed into a giant claw with a radius of 10,000 feet. The giant claw was black and cold, emitting a terrifying aura of death. It descended from the sky and grabbed Ji Tianqing and Yun Yao. The giant claw came silently, but its power was enough to destroy the heavens and the earth. Yiya thought that Ji Tianqing and Yun Yao would not be able to resist his attack because they were distracted. But he did not expect that Ji Tianqing would stare at him coldly and lock onto his divine soul aura as soon as the Claw of Annihilation appeared. Star-shattering fist. Ji Tianqing suddenly raised his left hand and fiercely blasted out a golden fist aura that was 10,000 feet long towards the Claw of Annihilation. Boom! The fist and the claw were both the size of a mountain and contained terrifying power. The two collided loudly and a thunderous sound erupted. At the same time they exploded in the sky and shattered into pieces. Thousands of fragments scattered in the sky. Ji Tianqing took the opportunity to rush towards Yiya and used his ultimate technique with the Burial of Heaven. Moon-breaking sword. A colorful sword aura that was 10,000 feet long appeared out of thin air and slashed towards Yiya with the power to destroy everything. This sword not only contained 100% of Ji Tianqing's Dharma power but also the power of 3 types of lightning. It was very powerful. Yiya's expression changed on the spot. His eyes were filled with terror. In a moment of desperation, black light surged out of his body and formed layers of black wings to protect himself. Bam! The 10,000 feet long giant sword hit him and there was a loud explosion. His body flashed with light and his black wings were all shattered. He was also sent flying in a sorry state. While he was still in midair, he had already opened his mouth and spat out dark red blood. A long and narrow wound split open on his chest and blood gushed out like a fountain. Yiya flew for a full 5 kilometers before crashing into the rubble, splashing rocks and dirt all over the sky. He could not believe that Ji Tianqing had actually broken through his defense and severely injured him with one strike. Fear filled his heart. He quickly crawled out of the rubble and turned to flee without hesitation, flying towards the depths of the flaming mountain. Chapter 1780. Ji Tianqing's killing intent had already risen, so how could he let Yiya go? When he successfully passed the tribulation and woke up, he made up his mind to kill Yiya to prevent future troubles. Swoosh! A golden light flashed and he flew across the sky at lightning speed, chasing after Yiya. Yunyao also entered the reverse water divine sword and drove it to chase after him. After a few breaths, both sides disappeared into the depths of the sea of fire. Both Honorable Sword Martial Lord and Qin Yu frowned, their eyes revealing worry. I can't believe it. That kid has just stepped into the Crossing Calamity Realm, and he can defeat that 7th level Crossing Calamity Realm powerhouse. In my memory, it's already an incredible miracle for a 1st level Crossing Calamity Realm powerhouse to defeat a 4th level Crossing Calamity Realm powerhouse. That kid can actually cross 6 levels to defeat a strong enemy. Simply unprecedented. Both of them were filled with shock and still found it hard to believe. Qin Yu thought for a moment and said worriedly, looking at the direction that the black-clothed man fled, it's obvious that he went deep into the Flaming Mountain. Martial Uncle, we also have to go deep into the Flaming Mountain to look for traces of the glazed fire dragon. Should we chase after him? Honorable Sword Martial Lord nodded and said, of course, I want to see how monstrous that kid is. After saying that, he flew across the sky with Qin Yu and also flew deep into the Flaming Mountain. 100 miles away, Madame Jean, Jiyu and Rong were all silent with complicated expressions. Especially Rong, her originally bright eyes had become somewhat dim, and her excited mood had also calmed down. After all, everyone saw that a woman in a white dress had appeared in the ice blue sword. The woman in the white dress was as beautiful as a fairy, and her temperament was otherworldly. She was a rare beauty in the world. Most importantly, the relationship between the woman in the white dress and Ji Tianqing was not shallow. They were quite close and looked like a couple. Seeing that Ronger's mood was somewhat low, Jiyu comforted her. Rong, you don't have to be disappointed. We haven't come into contact with that young master yet. Who knows if the woman in the white dress is his partner or his friend? Rong shook her head gently and said, Master's wife, don't worry. Rong is fine. Even if she had some regret and disappointment in her heart, how could she show it? Wouldn't that be a joke? Jiyu understood her temperament and continued to persuade her. Although the woman in white is a rare beauty in the world, our Rong is not bad either. Most importantly, Rong, your status is noble and your strength is not ordinary. In short, you still have a chance. Rong became more and more embarrassed. She quickly turned around and lowered her head. Mistress, please don't say any more. Rong doesn't have such thoughts. Jiyu wanted to persuade her again, but Madame Jean waved her hand to stop her. They've already left. If you continue to dawdle, we won't be able to catch up. Ronger said in a low voice, Granny, there's no need to chase after him. It's already our honor to be able to witness a peerless genius survive 9 bolts of lightning. As for the rest, Rong doesn't have any extravagant hopes. Madame Jean glanced at her and said with a kind smile, Silly child, what are you thinking? They're heading towards the depths of the blazing mountain and we're heading there too. No matter if we meet that young master or not, we still have to carry out the plan and search for the glazed fire dragon. Only then did Rong understand that she had misunderstood. She suddenly became even more embarrassed. Madame Jean no longer said anything. She took the two of them across the sky and flew towards the north. Yiya's body was wrapped in a layer of cold black light. He turned into a 3-foot-long black bird and was galloping in the sea of fire. Although he was injured by Ji Tianqing, the injury was not serious. In the process of escaping, he had already taken a healing pill, temporarily suppressing his injuries. However, he had just fought a big battle and flew continuously in the sea of fire for 4 hours. He had consumed a lot of his spiritual power. He already felt that his strength was falling short of his desire, and his flying speed was gradually slowing down. Looking back in the sea of fire 10 miles away, there were 2 rays of light, one gold and one blue, chasing after him. Yiya tilted his head and cursed fiercely, This pair of bitches has been chasing me for 4 hours, and they still don't want to give up. Humph. I'll let you be arrogant for a while. When I meet up with the first master, I'll come and take your lives. Yiya calculated in his heart. In another hour or so, he would be able to reach the vicinity of the glazed fire dragon's lair and meet up with the first master. At that time, he would definitely kill Ji Tianqing and Yunyao ruthlessly to wash away the previous shame. However, Yiya was scheming in his heart, but he did not know that Ji Tianqing and Yunyao also had a purpose. The two of them had been following behind Yiya, maintaining a distance of 10 miles. They could not only put a lot of pressure on Yiya but also not let him escape. Yun Yao was a little puzzled, so she secretly asked Ji Tianxing, "Tianxing, if you want to catch up with Yiya, you only need to fly on your sword. You will be able to stop him soon. We have already chased him for tens of thousands of miles. Why haven't you made a move yet?" Ji Tianxing's lips curled into a playful smile, and he explained unhurriedly, "What is our purpose in coming to the Flaming Mountain this time?" Yun Yao replied without hesitation, "We are looking for the materials to repair the divine sword, as well as the legendary glazed fire dragon." Ji Tianxing nodded slightly and said, "That's right. The materials to repair the divine sword have been gathered, and my heavenly tribulation has passed. Now we only have to find the glazed fire dragon." We rushed into the Flaming Mountain rashly without any informants or sources of information. It will be very difficult to find traces of the glazed fire dragon. But Yiya is the leader of the Black Feather Gang, and he has information and intelligence about the glazed fire dragon. When he robbed us before, a bandit said that they were rushing to support the first master. So I'm sure that the first master of the Black Feather Gang is most likely in the depths of the Flaming Mountain, and he has most likely found the glazed fire dragon. Hearing what he said, Yun Yao's eyes suddenly lit up and she said with some surprise, "Tianxing, you are really meticulous. You actually remembered this detail. No wonder Yiya didn't escape from the Flaming Mountain after being injured by you, but instead fled into the depths of the Flaming Mountain. From this, it seems that he wants to meet up with the first master of the Black Feather Gang, and then kill us for revenge." "That's right." Ji Tianxing nodded and said in a playful tone, "We need Yiya to lead the way and help us find the glazed fire dragon, so we can't kill him now. But when he is about to meet up with the first master of the Black Feather Gang, his death will come." Only then did Yun Yao understand his plan, and she couldn't help but nod in agreement. After a pause she asked again, "By the way, Tianxing, the 4 materials to repair the divine sword have been gathered. When do you plan to repair the divine sword?" Ji Tianxing said calmly, "The 4 materials can not only repair the Burial of Heaven sword, but also restore the divine sword to the holy level. But I have asked the Burial of Heaven, and it must be repaired by a martial sage expert and a holy level cauldron." Chapter 1781. Unknowingly, another hour had passed. Yiya flew desperately for more than 10,000 miles before he finally saw the light of hope. Under his feet was an undulating mountain range, and around him was a boundless sea of fire. However, in the distance, in the sky that was illuminated by the flames, there were flashes of Dharma spell brilliance that streaked across the sky like lightning. There was also a fiery red figure that was as tall as a mountain circling in the sky, constantly shattering the Dharma spell brilliance that filled the sky. That fiery red figure was very majestic and mighty. It was the legendary glazed fire dragon. It was obvious that the glazed fire dragon was fighting with many experts. The two sides were fighting an earth-shattering battle that could be seen tens of thousands of miles away. Accompanied by countless dazzling lights, there were also loud and furious dragon roars that came from the sky. Seeing such a scene, Yiya was shocked and his eyes were filled with anticipation. "That's great. The first master and my brothers must be waiting for me there. At most I'll be able to meet up with them in another hour." Yiya muttered to himself excitedly. His fatigue dissipated and he became energetic. However, at this moment he suddenly sensed an extremely dangerous aura behind him. He sensed that something was wrong and turned his head to look back. He was instantly dumbfounded. Unbeknownst to him, Ji Tianxing and the reverse water godly sword had actually flown 3,000 meters behind him and brazenly launched an attack. A blazing white sword light that was hundreds of feet long and that huge ice-blue divine sword was slashing down at him like an aurora. Whoosh, whoosh. The sword light and the divine sword attacked from both sides, locking onto Yiya's divine soul aura, making it impossible for him to escape. His eyes widened in shock, anger, and disbelief. No. How is this possible? How did they suddenly catch up? Yiya had been chased for more than 4 hours, and the other party had not been able to catch up to him. This made him mistakenly think that the other party only had this much strength and means. But now, the sudden attack had shattered his hopes and plans, and caused him to be filled with terror. Space Underworld escape. At this critical moment, Yi did not hesitate to use his full strength and used his ultimate escape technique. He flapped his pitch-black wings and used a great ability to break through the sky, instantly teleporting 20 miles away. Shwa! With a flash of light he appeared in the sky 20 miles away. The blazing white sword light missed its target and slashed into a mountain, causing a loud rumbling sound to ring out. The light golden mountain peak was slashed open by the sword ray, and a huge ravine was formed, causing the sky to be filled with shattered rocks. However, the 300-meter-long water reversal divine sword seemed to have eyes. It also tore through the air and teleported 20 miles, catching up with Yi. Boom! With a muffled sound, the reverse water sword struck Yi, causing him to fall from the sky and crash into the mountain range below. The black light shield protecting him was shattered by the divine sword. His back had also been slashed open by the divine sword. It was at least 2 feet long and was so deep that his bones could be seen. Fresh blood was gushing out. The unimaginable force caused him to crash heavily into a mountain peak that was thousands of meters tall. He had smashed a huge hole in the faint golden rock ground. The surrounding cracks were densely packed and countless rocks and soil were splashed out. The entire mountain began to shake as if it was unable to bear the weight and was about to collapse. However, the pain his body was enduring was nothing compared to the shock in his heart. Shwa! He quickly got up, crawled out of the deep hole and flew back into the sky. Before he could escape, Ji Tianxing had already caught up and blocked his path. The reverse water sword also floated behind him, blocking his escape route. He was surrounded and had no way to advance or retreat. However, he was a famous martial monarch. Even if he was in danger, he could still maintain his calm. He returned to his original form and returned to the appearance of the black-robed man. He stared coldly at Ji Tianxing and asked in a deep voice, "Boy, you were hiding your strength before? You deliberately chased me here?" At this point, if he still didn't understand what was going on, then he wouldn't be the second in command of the Black Feather Gang. Ji Tianxing looked at him expressionlessly and said indifferently, "Not bad, you're not too stupid." Yi sneered with a sinister face and cursed with resentment. "Little bastard, you actually dared to use me to find the traces of the glazed fire dragon. You're really audacious and reckless." Ji Tianxing still said indifferently, "I've already done so and succeeded. You've lost your value and can die." Haha. Yi sneered again, "Boy, you're despicable enough, but you forgot that I've already passed the 7th heavenly tribulation. How could I be so easy to deal with? Moreover, I'm the second in command of the Black Feather Gang. If you want to kill me, you'd better think about whether you're qualified to bear the revenge of the Black Feather Gang." Ji Tianxing still looked indifferent and said indifferently, "So what if you've passed the 7th heavenly tribulation? To me, no one below the martial saint realm is a match for me. Killing you is as easy as flipping my hand. As for the Black Feather Gang, a gang that I've never heard of, what can they do to me?" His relaxed and indifferent tone and calm demeanor all revealed his absolute confidence and domineering attitude. Yi was also intimidated by Ji Tianxing's domineering aura. He immediately revealed a stunned expression and was somewhat stunned. However, he could see that Ji Tianxing was not lying and was definitely not bluffing. His intimidation had failed and he became angry from embarrassment. His face became ferocious. He pointed to the sky in front of him and shouted angrily, "Boy, the leader of the Black Feather Gang is just in front of you, just 10,000 miles away. If you know what's good for you, retreat now and I can pretend that nothing happened. Otherwise, before you can defeat this sovereign, First Master will rush over and tear you to shreds." Yi's strength and identity could no longer suppress Ji Tianxing. He could only use the leader as his backer and hope that Ji Tianxing would have some scruples. Ji Tianxing frowned slightly and asked in a low voice, "The leader of the Black Feather Gang? Has he reached the martial saint realm?" "I haven't." Yi was stunned for a moment but still chose to tell the truth. After all, even if he made up nonsense, he could not hide it from Ji Tianxing. "Of course," he added confidently, "the leader's strength far surpasses mine and he has already passed the 8th stage of the heavenly tribulation." Before he could finish his sentence, Ji Tianxing interrupted him and said expressionlessly, "Since he has not reached the martial sage realm, let him come and save you. You can kill him as well." Ji Tianxing said it very casually as if he was talking about something like eating and drinking, careless. Yi was dumbfounded on the spot and stared at Ji Tianxing with his eyes bulging. The strong sense of anger and humiliation almost made him go berserk. However, he had no way to refute her and his face turned purple with anger. He really could not understand. Ji Tianqing had just passed the first heavenly tribulation and reached the first stage of the tribulation passing realm. Where did he get such strong confidence? He only had the strength of the first stage of the tribulation passing realm and he did not put an 8 tribulation martial lord in his eyes. Chapter 1782. Of course Ji Tianqing was just joking. He would not ask for trouble and give Yi a chance to ask for help. If Yi sent a message to the Black Feather Gang's leader for help, it would not only bring trouble but also delay time. Ji Tianqing decided to end the battle quickly. Taking advantage of Yi's rage and distraction, he decisively made his move. Sword thrust. The burial of heaven stabbed forward and a cold light bloomed, quickly disappearing into the sea of fire. The next moment, Yi sensed that something was wrong and was about to teleport away. That dot of cold light had already pierced his chest, piercing through his soft armor and flesh. A dazzling cold light exploded in his chest like fireworks. Bam! A loud explosion shook the sky as the cold light rose into the sky like a mushroom cloud. The dazzling white light drowned Yi's body. The terrifying explosive force tore his chest apart. His flesh and internal organs were blasted into pieces. He tumbled and flew out for more than 10 miles before falling from the sky. When he smashed into a mountain peak, his upper body was a bloody mess, leaving only a skeleton. Pieces of flesh and organs hung from the broken and incomplete skeleton. There were not many pieces of flesh left on his shoulders, revealing his blackened bones. Even half of his head had been blown up and it was a bloody mess. If it were anyone else, their body would have died after suffering such heavy injuries. However, Yi was different. He was a 7th-level Tribulation Transcendence Realm expert after all, and his vitality was extremely tenacious. His body was not dead yet, only heavily injured. He got up from the ground, quietly took out a chopstick-sized arrow token, and activated the array formation within. Whoosh! The arrow token turned into a wisp of black light, quickly flew into the sky and disappeared. After sending out the arrow token, he hurriedly used a secret technique to release a surging black light that enveloped his body. The black light enveloped his wounds, and his flesh and blood were reconstructing at a speed visible to the naked eye. He would be able to recover from his injuries in 10 breaths at most. Of course, that could only temporarily repair the missing flesh and blood and maintain the vitality of his body. If he wanted to truly recover from his injuries, he would have to go into seclusion for 2 to 3 years. Unfortunately, Ji Tianqing would not give him the chance to heal. 10 breaths of time was enough for Ji Tianqing to kill him several times over. Shwa! With a flash of golden light, Ji Tianqing teleported another 20 miles and arrived in front of Yi. Thunder! Ji Tianqing let out a low growl and opened the third eye on his forehead. His mysterious and deep eyes released an endless amount of lightning. Golden, purple and blue lightning condensed into a 300-meter-long pillar of lightning that struck Yi. Boom! At that instant, thunder rumbled while an enormous bang shook the heavens, and it wasn't inferior to Ji Tianqing's tribulation in the slightest. The 3 different colored lightning pillars contained the power of 3 different attributes, and their might was extremely violent. Yi's heavily injured body was shattered by the lightning on the spot, turning into countless charred pieces that scattered in all directions. This time his body was completely destroyed. The 1,000-feet-tall golden mountain was also shattered by the thunderbolts, collapsing into a pile of ruins with a deafening rumble. A black bird that looked like a crow flew out of the smoke and lightning in the sky. It wasn't a physical object, but Yi's divine soul. After it escaped from the area covered by the lightning, it fled towards the north in horror, bursting out with its fastest speed. However, Yunyao was already ready. Shua! The 300-meter-long water-reversing divine sword slashed down from the side with an overwhelming icy blue light, drowning Yi's divine soul. Bang! At that moment, Yunyao used a spell to maximize the power of the water-reversing divine sword. Yi's divine soul was directly shattered by the divine sword, turning into thousands of wisps of black qi that scattered in the sea of fire. He couldn't resist the water-reversing divine sword at all. When the icy blue brilliance dissipated, The black qi that scattered between heaven and earth was also burned into nothingness by the azure glass heavenly fire. The second in command of the Black Feather Gang, a martial lord at the 7th level of the Tribulation Transcendence realm, died in the depths of the flaming mountain. The huge water-reversing divine sword quickly shrank to 3 feet long. With a flash of light, Yun Yao flew out of the divine sword and appeared in the sky. Holding the water-reversing divine sword in her hand, she walked to Ji Tianxing and stood still. Phew. I've finally dealt with these despicable bandits. I don't have to be entangled by them anymore. Yun Yao put away the water-reversing divine sword and heaved a sigh of relief. Ji Tianxing nodded and said calmly, Yiya and those ordinary bandits are nothing to worry about. The key is the leader of the Black Feather Gang. I'm afraid it's not easy to deal with. Before Yiya was killed, he released a black light. It seemed to be a message arrow. In my opinion, he must have sent it to the leader of the Black Feather Gang. We have to be careful. The people of the Black Feather Gang will definitely take revenge on us. Yun Yao stared at him and said with a teasing smile, Didn't you just say that you are invincible below the martial sage realm? The leader of the Black Feather Gang is not a martial sage. Even if he comes, he will definitely die. Ji Tianxing said calmly, I was just saying. You believe my words to scare Yiya? Yun Yao rolled her eyes at him. At this moment, Ji Tianxing turned to look at the sky behind him and said in a deep voice, The two of you don't have to hide. Come out. However, the sky within 100 miles was quiet. Other than the surging sea of fire, there was no other figure. Ji Tianxing waited for a moment and continued, The two of you, it's not like we haven't met before. Why are you hiding? Obviously he had discovered the other party. Not only were there 2 people, but they had met before. As his voice fell, 2 figures appeared in the sky 30 miles away. One was an old man in a purple robe, and the other was a young man in a black suit, carrying a broadsword on his back. These 2 people were Martial Lord Brightsword and Qinyu. The 2 of them had secretly followed Ji Tianxing and Yun Yao. Just now they had hidden nearby and witnessed the process of Yiya being killed with their own eyes. The 2 of them were filled with shock and were very afraid of Ji Tianxing. At this moment their whereabouts had been seen through by Ji Tianxing. The 2 of them were forced to appear and they were both somewhat embarrassed and distressed. Qinyu lowered his head slightly and put on an expressionless appearance. He did not dare to look directly into Ji Tianxing's eyes. Martial Lord Brightsword stroked his beard and looked at Ji Tianxing expressionlessly. He pretended to be calm and said, Little friend, I was passing by this place. I didn't expect to meet you again. It's really fate. Ji Tianxing sneered in his heart, but his expression did not change. He said indifferently, This is the hinterland of the Flaming Mountain. There are countless experts and glazed fire dragons roaming about. It's very dangerous. You 2 old, weak and disabled people are actually wandering around here. Aren't you afraid of losing your lives? This is not a place you should come to. Quickly leave. His expression and tone were filled with disdain, as if he was a strong person looking down on the weak. Martial Lord Brightsword and Qinyu's expressions changed drastically. They were humiliated to the point that their faces turned ashen. The blood in their bodies flowed in reverse and they almost spat out a mouthful of blood. It was because what Ji Tianxing said was exactly what Martial Lord Brightsword had said back then. Chapter 1783. The thick anger and humiliation caused Brightsword Martial Lord and Qinyu to tremble in anger. Qinyu was still fine, but Brightsword Martial Lord was a famous expert who had been living like a prince for many years. In the empire he belonged to, no matter where he went, he was treated as an honored guest by many forces and was respected and flattered by countless martial artists. He relied on his noble status and martial arts experience, and always considered himself a martial arts senior. It was because of this that when he saw Ji Tianxing and Yun Yao barge into the blazing mountain, he gave them a few pointers. But he never would have thought that Ji Tianxing would return the words he said to him without missing a word. Moreover, Ji Tianxing's tone and attitude were even more arrogant. How could Brightsword Martial Lord accept this? But what could he do if he didn't endure it? Even Yiya had been killed by Ji Tianxing. How could he dare to shed all pretense of cordiality with Ji Tianxing? He took a few deep breaths and barely suppressed his anger. He stared at Ji Tianxing with a gloomy gaze and said in a deep voice, "Young man, don't be so arrogant when you're young. You still have a long way to go. When you're outside, it's best to restrain yourself. If you can't even distinguish between superior and inferior, you'll definitely suffer a great loss in the future. Ji Tianxing immediately revealed a sneer and said with a mocking tone, "Superior and inferior? Who do you think is superior and inferior? Who is superior and who is inferior? There's no need to wait for the future. I want to see right now what kind of loss can you make me suffer." He stared coldly at Bright Sword Martial Lord. His gaze and tone were extremely sharp, as if he was going to confront him head-on. Bright Sword Martial Lord's face immediately turned ashen. His lungs were about to explode from anger, but he was still unable to flare up. When Qinyu saw that his martial uncle was humiliated, his blood surged and he shouted angrily, "Brat! You're too arrogant. My martial uncle is a highly respected martial arts senior, an expert who has been famous for many years. Previously, outside the Blazing Mountain, he only reminded you out of kindness. I didn't expect that you would be so narrow-minded and seek revenge for the smallest grievance. You really don't know what's good for you." Ji Tianxing looked at Qinyu indifferently and sneered, "Hee hee, you only reminded us out of kindness? I don't think so. We don't even know you. Do we need you to remind us? All of you are meddling in other people's business." At the same time, he took advantage of his seniority and put on a high and mighty attitude. "You think you are kind, but in fact you think you are better than others. Now, I'm reminding you out of goodwill to leave this place as soon as possible. Why don't you accept my kind reminder?" Moreover, he looks so angry that he's about to go crazy. Speaking to there, he looked at the Honorable Sword Martial Lord with disdain, sneered and said, "You opened your mouth to berate others, which is a kind reminder. I'm also reminding you, so how is that not knowing what's good for me? No matter what you say, you are always in the right. You're already so old, don't you have any shame?" Ji Tianxing's series of words had exposed Bright Sword Martial Lord and Qinyu's background, causing the two of them to feel extremely ashamed and indignant. Qinyu was so angry that his face turned black. His eyes were dyed with a layer of blood red. He was already on the verge of going berserk. Bright Sword Martial Lord was also so angry that his hands were trembling. He was so humiliated that he almost vomited blood. Seeing this, Qinyu reached out to grab the sword hilt behind his back, as if he was about to draw his sword. Bright Sword Martial Lord hurriedly raised his hand to stop him. He said with a sound transmission, "Qinyu, don't be impulsive. Bear with it for a while and calm down. Don't forget our goal. It's not a wise move to make a move against this brat now." Qinyu could only suppress his anger and slowly retract his right hand. He stared coldly at Ji Tianxing and said in a deep voice, "Brat, I'll let you be arrogant for a while. My martial uncle is magnanimous and won't lower himself to your level. But don't forget, there is always someone better than you. There will always be someone who can teach you a lesson." Ji Tianxing's smile became even more playful. He said with a mocking tone, "You guys want to lower yourself to my level, but do you have the ability?" Such a straightforward provocation and humiliation caused Bright Sword Martial Lord's face to turn black. Under his anger, he actually spat out a mouthful of blood. Qinyu also went completely berserk. With a clang, he pulled out the broadsword on his back. With a roar, he charged towards Ji Tianxing. "You bastard, I'll fight it out with you." Qinyu held the sword with both hands. His entire body ignited with scarlet flames. He used all his strength to slash out 100-meter-long flame sword. He was a 4th-level Tribulation Realm expert. Under his rage, he launched an attack. The power of this sword was unstoppable. However, Ji Tianxing didn't take it seriously at all. With an indifferent expression, he waved his sleeves and struck out a resplendent golden light with his right hand. A huge golden palm shadow slashed towards the sword light. Boom! With a crisp explosion, the flame sword was shattered by the palm shadow on the spot. The power of the golden palm didn't dissipate. It struck Qinyu again, sending him flying 10 miles away. Qinyu drew an arc in the sky and smashed into a mountain peak, causing rubble to fly all over the sky. When he got up, his mouth and nose were already bleeding and his eyes were seeing stars. "I'm going to kill you." Qinyu was completely enraged. Like a lion that had lost its mind, he let out a furious roar and once again charged towards Ji Tianxing. However, just as he was halfway there, he was stopped by Bright Sword Martial Lord. "Qinyu, stop." Bright Sword Martial Lord waved his sleeve and shot out an icy blue brilliance that wrapped around Qinyu. Qinyu was unable to break free. His anger and manic emotions were quickly suppressed and he gradually regained his calm. Bright Sword Martial Lord brought him into the sky and flew towards the depths of the flaming mountain. Before leaving, he turned his head to look at Ji Tianxing and left a sentence with a gloomy expression. Brat, it's easy to break if you're too hard. Sooner or later you'll die prematurely. Bright Sword Martial Lord was cursing Ji Tianxing. His thoughts were extremely vicious. Ji Tianxing also returned the favor and shouted disdainfully, I'll spare your lives today just to teach you a lesson. Old man, remember, don't meddle in other people's business in the future. Don't rely on your seniority to judge the world. Otherwise, sooner or later you'll attract a calamity. Bright Sword Martial Lord coldly snorted and no longer argued with him. He quickly left with Qinyu. When the two of them were far away, Ji Tianxing's expression finally returned to normal. He rushed forward with Yunyao. Yunyao looked at him with a strange expression and secretly asked, Tianxing, in the past, you were indifferent and wouldn't punish those two fellows like this. Now not only has your temperament changed, your temperament has also changed to do as you please. Could it be that Kenshin had such a personality back then? That's not it. Ji Tianxing chuckled and said, Kenshin's temperament was too cold and indifferent. He was more like a god in the sky and not like a mortal. Because of this, even though he ascended to the upper realm and became the king of gods, he let down too many people and left behind many regrets. Chapter 1784. Yunyao's intuition was right. Ji Tianxing had indeed changed. Ever since he had transcended the tribulation and awakened a portion of Kenshin's memories, his temperament had changed. He was dignified without being angry, as if he was a god that had descended from the 9 heavens, majestic and noble. At the same time, his temperament had also changed. In the past he was modest and polite, had a mild temperament and was kind. He would not easily offend others. But now he was like an unsheathed divine sword, sharp and unstoppable. Yunyao thought to herself, the Kenshin of the past was too cold, like a god that did not eat the food of mortals. He lacked a bit of humanity. The Tianxing of the past was too modest and kind, and his temperament was indifferent. He was often taken advantage of. Perhaps the current him is the most suitable and the most genuine? Thinking of this, a touch of gratification and anticipation flashed in her eyes. She knew that Ji Tianxing had now completed his transformation and had truly grown into a martial arts powerhouse. The battlefield where the glazed fire dragon and the many powerhouses were fighting was tens of thousands of miles away from Ji Tianxing and Yunyao. The two of them continued to fly north for 4 hours before arriving near the battlefield. However, when the two of them arrived, the battle had already ended. The spell light that blotted out the sky had already dissipated, and the fire dragon that was hundreds of miles long had also disappeared. When the two of them arrived at the battlefield, they only saw that the mountain range within a 1,000-mile radius was in a complete mess. In the golden glazed fire dragon, there were broken rocks and collapsed mountain ranges everywhere. The ground was covered with ravines, densely packed like a spider web. There were also countless deep pits like abysses. There were still remnants of chaotic dermic power fluctuations in the air, as well as the aura of powerhouses from various races. In the ruins within a 1,000-mile radius, there were still some scattered fragments of Dharma treasures and some minced flesh and bones. Under the burning of the glazed fire dragon, those Dharma treasures, weapons and pieces of corpses would soon be burned to ashes. Ji Tianxing could imagine that the destruction caused by the battle between those powerhouses and the glazed fire dragon was extremely shocking. However, he and Yunyao searched the entire battlefield and only saw a few adventurers. Those adventurers were all in the tribulation realm. 2 of them were seriously injured and left the battlefield with gloomy expressions. They had no choice but to leave the mountain of flames. The other few people, like the 2 of them, had just rushed over. Other than that, the experts who had fought with the glazed fire dragon were nowhere to be found. Yunyao was a little puzzled. She transmitted her voice and asked, Tianxing, where did those experts go? Could it be that the glazed fire dragon has escaped and they are still chasing after it? Ji Tianxing nodded and said, that should be the case. I used a secret technique to investigate the area. There are definitely remnants of those experts' auras in the vicinity. After saying that, he formed a seal with both hands and activated a secret technique. When he formed a mysterious seal with his fingers, his palms immediately shone with a golden light. Open heaven, divine eyes. With a low shout, he pressed his index and middle fingers together and pressed them against the third eye on his forehead. Suddenly, the third eye opened and a mysterious golden light shone from the pupil. In the open heaven, divine eyes, the scene he saw changed. In the turbulent golden sea of flames, there were thousands of colorful threads floating. They were gradually fading and becoming thinner and thinner. Those colorful threads were the remnants of the auras of the Tribulation Realm experts. He could clearly see that most of the colorful threads in the sky were pointing north. Therefore he continued to fly north with Yunyao. Follow me. We will find them soon. Yunyao did not doubt his words at all. She hurriedly followed him and flew north. The two of them shuttled through the sea of flames as fast as lightning. Along the way, Ji Tianqing used the open heaven divine eyes to see that there were countless colorful threads left in the sky. Yunyao also used her divine sense to observe that there were many traces of fighting on the ground and in the mountains below. About an hour later, the two of them flew more than 10,000 miles. Ji Tianqing's open heaven divine eyes had already lost its power and naturally dissipated. He and Yunyao could see that there was a huge flame vortex in the mountains in front of them. The vortex, with a radius of 100 miles, was formed by golden heavenly flames and was tens of thousands of feet high. The vortex was located in a wide valley surrounded by majestic mountain ranges. Around the flame vortex, there were dozens of auras of the Tribulation Realm experts. Some were fierce and domineering, while others were gloomy and low-key. In addition, there were occasionally figures of martial artists flashing in the sky. It's here. Ji Tianqing raised his eyebrows and a hint of hope flashed in his eyes. Yunyao looked at the flame vortex and said with a serious expression, Tianqing, there are at least 30 Tribulation Realm experts hiding around the flame vortex. It seems that there is something strange about the flame vortex. It is very likely to be the hiding place of the glazed fire dragon. Yes. Ji Tianqing nodded and said, let's also go and take a look. We will act according to the situation. After a while, the two of them arrived near the flame vortex. Both of them used the invisibility secret technique and hid on top of a mountain, observing from above. They saw that the valley at the foot of the mountain was an abyss with a radius of 100 miles. The glazed fire dragon was constantly gushing out from the abyss, releasing a violent impact that condensed into a huge vortex. The dazzling flame vortex covered the entire abyss, making it impossible for people to see the situation inside. Ji Tianqing released his soul consciousness to explore. After exploring for 30 miles, his soul consciousness was blocked by an invisible force and could not reach the bottom of the abyss. Obviously, the mysterious abyss of heavenly flames was much deeper than 30 miles. Moreover, the abyss contained an extremely terrifying power. Ji Tianqing looked around the abyss again. The surrounding mountains were straight and steep, forming a circle of cliffs. After a quarter of an hour, he finished his observation and had a general understanding of the abyss of heavenly flames. Yunyao secretly sent him a voice transmission. Tianqing, I see that those Tribulation Realm experts are lurking around the abyss. They seem to be afraid of the abyss and don't dare to enter it. Ji Tianqing nodded slightly and explained, those powerful experts had fought the flame-glazed dragon earlier, and all of them suffered some minor or serious injuries. They followed the glazed fire dragon here. When they saw the glazed fire dragon enter the abyss, they didn't dare to chase after it. They had to stay near the abyss to heal their wounds. Yunyao was a little surprised. How do you know it so clearly? As if you saw it with your own eyes. It's just my speculation. Ji Tianqing revealed a faint smile and explained, I've already detected the remnant aura of the divine dragon in the abyss. Basically, I'm sure that the glazed fire dragon escaped into this abyss. Yunyao thought for a while and asked, those experts are injured and don't dare to enter the abyss rashly. We have the reverse water divine sword, which can restrain the glazed fire dragon. How about we take the initiative and enter the abyss to explore? Ji Tianqing chuckled and waved his hand. Don't worry. We're new here. If we rush in rashly, we won't be able to achieve anything. Chapter 1785. Yunyao had always believed in Ji Tianqing's words. She suppressed the anticipation in her heart, quietly observed and waited patiently. Like Ji Tianqing, she remained invisible and hid in the 1,000-feet-high peak. Unknowingly, 6 hours had passed. The abyss of heavenly fire had been very calm. There were no strange phenomena or sounds. However, there were constantly powerhouses rushing to the abyss and hiding in the mountains to observe the situation. Xianxia was very patient. While waiting, he chatted with Yunyao. Yao Yao, it is said that the glazed fire dragon's strength has not reached the martial sage realm. After I catch it, I will give it to you as a mount. How about it? Yunyao shook her head gently and said, that is a divine dragon above the 8th level of the tribulation stage. How can it be easily caught by you? However, if you can get the glazed fire dragon, it will be a great surprise. Xianxia chuckled and said, I have a black dragon. If you get a glazed fire dragon, we can travel the world in the future. Yunyao was a little tempted and nodded with a smile. The two chatted for a while, then fell silent and continued to wait. Soon half a day passed. The abyss of heavenly fire was still calm and there was nothing unusual. However, some people lost their patience and were ready to make a move. There was a group of powerhouses who had not fought with the glazed fire dragon before and rushed here. They secretly observed for a long time and finally decided to take action after considering for a long time. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. 3 powerhouses flew over the sea of fire and entered the abyss of heavenly fire. The strength of these 3 people had reached the 4th level of the tribulation stage. They were experienced adventurers. Although they took the lead and seemed a little impatient and reckless. However, they had carefully considered their actions and were very cautious. After entering the abyss, they flew down unhurriedly. They held their magic treasures and weapons and were on guard against their surroundings at all times. After a while, the 3 of them disappeared into the sea of fire. The powerhouses lurking around the abyss released their invisible divine senses and secretly observed the movements of the 3 people. Xianxia and Yunyao were no exception. They used their divine senses to stare at the 3 people. Soon 15 minutes passed. The 3 powerhouses flew down for about 30 miles and remained safe and sound. However, there was an invisible barrier that could block the probing of divine sense. It took a lot of effort for the 3 powerhouses to pass through the invisible barrier and continue to fly down. They had left the detection range of everyone's divine sense, which was equivalent to disappearing. Many experts couldn't find any traces of the 3 people, and they all started to have doubts in their hearts. Not long after, an earth-shattering dragon roar came from the abyss. Roar. Following the loud sound, the entire abyss began to tremble. Immediately after, a torrential scarlet fire emerged from the abyss, as well as a 5-colored brilliance of magic power. Boom. Endless heavenly fire and mana light converged into a huge light pillar that shot up into the sky from the abyss. The experts around the abyss were shocked and realized that the situation was not good. As expected, the rumbling sounds of fighting immediately came from the abyss. Along with the sound of spells exploding, there were also a few screams and cries of pain. A few breaths later, a pale blue light burst out from the abyss. Swoosh. In the pale blue brilliance was a man in armor. It was one of the 3 adventurers from before. He had already lost an arm and a leg and his body was dripping with blood. His injuries were very serious. He was so scared that his soul almost left his body. He desperately tried to escape. However, just as he was about to escape halfway and was about 20 miles away from leaving the abyss, he was caught by a dark golden dragon claw. That huge dragon claw was as big as a palace. It was dark golden all over like glass. The dragon claw was very thick and powerful. The sharp nails seemed to be indestructible. The surface was covered with golden dragon scales, and its defensive power was very strong. After the armored man was caught by the dragon claw, his screams came to an abrupt end, and he immediately stopped moving. Following a burst of cracking sounds, he was crushed into pieces by the dragon claw, turning into a pile of flesh and blood that scattered in the abyss. Even his soul was crushed by the dragon claw, turning into hundreds of pieces and burned into nothingness by the heavenly fire. The huge dragon claw retracted. Peace was restored in the heavenly fire abyss as if nothing had happened. The powerhouses around the abyss saw this scene with their own eyes, and they were all full of horror. Especially those powerhouses who had just arrived and had not fought with the glazed fiery dragon. Seeing the terrifying means of the glazed fiery dragon, their mouths and tongues were dry, and their hearts were pounding. The death of the 3 adventurers extinguished the restless hearts of the crowd, and everyone calmed down. Xianxia and Yunyao looked at each other with dignified eyes. Yun Yao frowned and analyzed. The strength of the three adventurers is not bad, but they didn't even last for 10 breaths. The glazed fiery dragon is too strong. Tianxing, I think this abyss is strange. It is very likely to be the lair of the glazed fiery dragon. Tianxing nodded and said, I observed the dragon claw just now and I can roughly judge the strength of the glazed fiery dragon. It is between the 8th level of the Crossing Tribulation realm and the Martial Sage realm. This abyss should be its lair. There are other mysteries in it, so we can't rush in rashly. Yun Yao agreed and continued to analyze. The glazed fiery dragon is so powerful, but it hides in the abyss and refuses to come out. I guess it is also injured or its strength has faded. It's very possible. Tianxing smiled and said, let's continue to wait and let those people explore first to consume the power of the glazed fiery dragon. If we want to get the glazed fiery dragon, we can't be in a hurry. The one who can persist to the end has the greatest chance of success. After making up their minds, the two continued to hide in the mountain and secretly observe the situation. Peace was restored around the abyss. Unknowingly, a whole day passed. The death of the three adventurers deterred many powerhouses, and no one dared to act rashly. However, on the second day, some people couldn't hold back anymore. 4 oddly dressed powerhouses broke into the abyss together. Their figures and facial features were very similar to those of the human race, but there were obvious differences. Obviously, these 4 were powerhouses of the alien race. They had mastered special spells and magical powers, so they dared to be so confident. Moreover, their strength was slightly stronger. 3 of them had reached the 5th level of the Crossing Tribulation realm. The leader's strength had reached the 6th level of the Crossing Tribulation realm. The 4 of them spread out and formed some kind of formation. Holding a special magic treasure, they flew into the abyss. The powerhouses around the abyss released their divine senses one after another, paying attention to their movements and situation. After a while, the 4 powerhouses of the alien race dived 30 miles, passed through the invisible barrier, and entered the depths of the abyss. Everyone stared at the abyss, secretly wondering how long the 4 powerhouses of the alien race could last. Time passed by bit. About half an hour later, an angry dragon roar suddenly sounded in the calm abyss. Roar. When the dragon roar sounded, the abyss trembled again. Chapter 1786. There was no doubt that the 4 foreign race experts had encountered the glazed fire dragon, and the 2 sides were fighting fiercely. More than 30 experts around the abyss were all staring at the movements in the abyss. Surging crimson fire and colorful magical brilliance gushed out like spring water and flew high into the sky. Some weaker warriors hurriedly retreated far away, not daring to be too close to the abyss for fear of being affected. Earth-shaking fighting sounds constantly came from the abyss. Even the silhouettes of fiery dragons flashed across the abyss. After about 100 breaths of time, the loud noises dissipated, and the abyss returned to calm. The 4 foreign race experts never appeared again. Everyone knew without guessing that they must have been buried in the dragon's belly. For a time, many experts felt uneasy and even more fearful and worried. Some experts who wanted to take advantage of the situation could only give up the idea and make further plans. Some weaker experts knew that they were inferior to the 4 foreign race experts and had no hope of obtaining the glazed fire dragon, so they left wisely. Tianxing was still the same as before. He hid in the mountain peak calmly and waited patiently. Next, the abyss was quiet for 2 days. During these 2 days, some experts came from all directions and gathered around the abyss. There were also some experts who lost patience and confidence and left the abyss in disappointment. 2 days later, another group of experts stepped into the abyss. This group of experts was an adventurer team. They had been exploring and searching for treasures in the ruins of God. They were quite famous in the adventurer world and were ranked in the top 5 forces. They had a total of 14 people, and the leader had the strength of the 7th stage of the Tribulation Transcendence realm. The other dozen people were also elite experts, and their strength was above the 4th stage of the Tribulation Transcendence realm. Looking at the surroundings of the heavenly fire abyss, this group was the strongest and had the most hope of obtaining the glazed fire dragon. When this adventurer team entered the abyss, the remaining 20 or so experts were a little panicked. Their hearts were filled with hesitation and anxiety. They didn't dare to enter the abyss for fear of being killed by the fire dragon. However, they were also worried that the adventurer team would successfully capture the glazed fire dragon. Therefore, everyone was worried about their gains and losses. They were in a dilemma and their mood was very torturous. A few powerhouses weighed the pros and cons for a moment before following him into the abyss, wanting to get a share of the loot. Yun Yao was also a little worried. She sent a voice transmission to Ji Tianxing. Tianxing, that adventurer team has a lot of people and they are all elite experts. I'm afraid they have a high chance of capturing the glazed fire dragon. Are we still going to wait? Why don't we follow them in and act according to the situation? Ji Tianxing calmly sat inside the cave. Chuckling, he said, "Don't worry. If that adventurer team had succeeded, the glazed flame dragon would have long since been snatched away. How could it have survived until now? They are the best cannon fodder and they can consume the glazed fire dragon's strength." With that, he pointed at the southwest and northeast corners of the abyss and said with a playful tone, "What I'm really guarding against now are those two groups." Yun Yao probed with her divine sense and found that there were 9 tribulation stage powerhouses lurking in the southwest corner of the abyss. They were obviously in the same group. In the northeast corner of the abyss, there were 3 experts hiding and all of them were women. There was a white-haired old woman, a middle-aged woman, and a beautiful young woman. On the surface, these 3 women didn't seem to be a threat. However, Yun Yao vaguely felt that the white-haired old woman with a walking stick had unfathomable strength. She frowned and asked, "Tianxing, do you mean that those 2 groups are like us? They are very patient and want to take advantage of the situation?" "That's right." Ji Tianxing nodded and said, "Those who are in a hurry to enter the abyss are all cannon fodder. Only the 3 of us have a chance of capturing the glazed fire dragon. Among the 3 women, the white-haired old woman is the strongest. I'm afraid she is close to a martial sage. She's our strongest competitor. As for the 9 experts in the southwest corner, their auras are very gloomy and bloodthirsty. I'm afraid they are evil forces or adventurer teams. Since they are so patient, we have to be cautious." Yun Yao nodded to show that she understood. She secretly observed the 2 groups of people. Not long after, an earth-shattering dragon roar came from the abyss again. Surging heavenly fire and dazzling magic power gushed out like a fountain, covering the sky for hundreds of miles. The commotion caused by the battle this time was particularly shocking. The entire abyss was shaking violently, and the surrounding cliffs and precipitous cliffs were shaking so much that cracks appeared. Moreover, as many as 20 tribulation stage powerhouses entered the abyss. The battle lasted for half an hour before it gradually came to a stop. In the end, only 2 powerhouses escaped from the abyss covered in blood. One of them was the leader of the adventurer team, a powerhouse in the 7th stage of the tribulation stage. The other person was an old man in a black robe. He followed the adventurer team into the abyss to take advantage of the situation. Both of them were seriously injured. Their auras were very chaotic and their expressions were extremely frightened. The leader of the adventurer team had lost an arm. He desperately performed a secret technique and turned into a streak of blood light to fly out of the abyss. After escaping from the abyss, he flew away without looking back. The old man in the black robe behind him was very unlucky. He was about to fly out of the abyss and was about to escape danger. Suddenly, a huge fiery red figure flew out of the abyss. Zhoush. It was a red divine dragon that was hundreds of miles long and thousands of feet thick. Its entire body was wrapped in surging golden heavenly fire. It raised its head to the sky, opened its huge dragon mouth, and spat out a mighty stream of golden flames. The severely injured old man in the black robe had lost both of his legs, so his strength was greatly reduced. After being hit by the golden flames, he immediately let out a heart-wrenching scream. His entire body was burned into black ashes. In just 2 short breaths, his physical body was destroyed and turned into ashes in the golden flames. His divine soul was also severely injured and he fled in terror. However, the glaze fire dragon waved its huge front claws and grabbed his soul, crushing it directly. The old man in the black robe was killed by the glaze fire dragon in front of everyone. Then the glaze fire dragon let out a majestic roar. Its indifferent eyes swept around the abyss before it turned back into the abyss. Obviously, it knew that there were many powerhouses lurking around the abyss. It was warning everyone that if they dared to enter its lair, only death would await them. At this moment, Many powerhouses were shocked by the power of the divine dragon. They were filled with fear and felt chills all over their bodies. In just a short while, 7 groups of powerhouses had fled the abyss. They did not dare to have any ideas about the glaze fire dragon. Only 5 groups of people stayed. However, 2 groups of people were hesitating and did not dare to act rashly. Xianxia, who had been very patient all this time, suddenly changed his attitude. His eyes shone with a bright light. He looked at Yunyao with a smile and said through voice transmission, "Yao Yao, the time has come. It's time for us to strike." Chapter 1787. All the experts who had entered the abyss had been killed. Only one of them had escaped with serious injuries. After that, the glazed fire dragon showed up and warned everyone in a domineering manner. At this critical moment, whoever entered the abyss would be courting death, wouldn't it? Yunyao looked at Xianxia doubtfully. He was a little worried. Xianxia smiled and explained, "The glazed fire dragon's intelligence is no less than that of human beings. It also knows the principle of what is false is true and what is true is false. In the past few days, it has been besieged and hunted by various experts. Its vitality must have been greatly damaged. It can't maintain its peak condition. If not, it wouldn't have escaped back to the abyss to hide and expose its lair to everyone. This can only mean that it has reached the point where it can't do anything." Yunyao immediately understood what he meant. She said, "I understand now. You mean that if the glazed fire dragon had maintained its peak condition, it wouldn't have been able to hide in its lair. The experts couldn't have chased it and found this abyss. Since it hid in the abyss, it proves that its vitality has been greatly damaged. Those experts who entered the abyss before were all killed by it. It's just bluffing to intimidate us." Xianxia nodded and continued, "That's right. It's strong in appearance but weak in reality. That's why it showed up to scare everyone away. But it neglected one point. If it hadn't shown up, we wouldn't have been able to determine its condition. Now that it has shown up, I'm even more certain that its strength has been weakened. I've checked it just now. Although it tried to hide it, I could still sense that its divine soul aura was a little chaotic. In addition, there was a faint black aura in its pale golden eyes, which proved that it was injured. Moreover, the color of the reverse scale on its neck, which was hidden among the many dragon scales, was slightly dim. These signs can prove that its vitality has been greatly damaged." Yunyao opened her eyes slightly, revealing a look of disbelief. She asked in surprise and doubt, "Xianxia, how do you know these things? Why do you know so much about the divine dragon?" Xianxia didn't explain anything. He just smiled and pointed at his head. Yunyao could vaguely guess that this must have something to do with Kenshin's memories. Just now, the glazed fire dragon only appeared for a short moment. You actually observed it so carefully and even discovered these problems. It's really incredible. After saying that, she used her divine sense to look at the other 2 groups of powerhouses and said worriedly, "Xianxia, those 2 groups of powerhouses can no longer hold back and have started to take action. Could it be that they have also noticed that the glazed fire dragon's strength has greatly decreased?" Xianxia said with certainty. At most, they can only sense that something is wrong with the glazed fiery dragon's soul. As for the black gas in the dragon's eyes and the changes in the reverse scale, they definitely wouldn't be able to tell. After all, no one knows Shenlong better than I do. While he was talking to Yunyao, the 2 groups of experts had already moved. The 9 experts from the southwest corner of the abyss were the first to enter the abyss. The 9 experts seemed to be intrepid and reckless, but in reality they were very cautious and had a tacit understanding. They spread out and 4 experts took the lead to open the path. The leader was in the middle and the other 4 followed behind. Everyone flew down unhurriedly. Not long after, they passed through the invisible barrier and disappeared from everyone's divine sense range. Immediately after, the 3 women from the northeast corner of the abyss also entered the abyss. The white-haired old woman leaned on her walking stick and walked in front calmly. The middle-aged woman and the young woman followed behind, on guard at any time. After 100 breaths of time, they also entered the abyss and disappeared. At this time, there were only 3 groups of people left around the abyss. In addition to Xianxia and Yunyao, there were also 2 groups of Tribulation Realm powerhouses. The 2 groups of powerhouses became even more hesitant. They wanted to follow them into the abyss. but they were also afraid of the glazed fire dragon's strength. Xianxia took a look. One of the two groups of powerhouses was from a sect. There were a total of 5 people, all wearing standard robes, and their behavior was relatively upright. Coincidentally, among these 5 people there were Martial Lord Brightsword and Qinyu. Xianxia secretly sized them up a few times, then left the mountain peak with Yunyao and stepped into the abyss. Go. It's time for us to go down. He and Yunyao remained invisible. They passed through the raging flame vortex and approached the bottom of the abyss. In a short while the two of them had dived 30 miles deep. A layer of dark golden flame light barrier blocked their path. This huge light barrier was like a golden mirror. It was a naturally formed array formation. Xianxia used a small trick to break through the flame light barrier and continued to dive down with Yunyao. On the mountain peaks around the abyss, only 2 groups of powerhouses were still hesitating and weighing the pros and cons. Although Xianxia and Yunyao were invisible, these 2 groups of powerhouses were quite strong and could detect their auras. Therefore these 2 groups of people were even more conflicted. Martial Lord Brightsword looked at the golden-robed elder beside him and said solemnly, "Senior Brother Jean, don't hesitate anymore. Let's go down as well." The young man and woman I mentioned to you before also entered the abyss. That white-robed youth attracted 9 bolts of heavenly lightning and successfully passed through them. Qinyu and I saw it with our own eyes. He also killed a 7th-level transcending tribulation stage powerhouse. We also saw it with our own eyes. I guarantee with my life that that kid is definitely the #1 monstrous genius on the continent. Since he dares to enter the abyss, he must have found something. We just need to follow him in secret and wait for an opportunity to make a move. The golden-robed elder was tall and sturdy. His face and skin were bronze and his pair of white eyebrows were very eye-catching. He frowned and thought for a while, then said in a solemn tone, "Junior Brother Brightsword, I believe in your and Qinyu's experience and knowledge. But the 2 of us are 2 of the 4 powerhouses of the Azure sect. These 3 juniors are the most promising elite disciples of our sect. If we rashly enter the abyss, if we encounter an accident and die under the claws of the glazed fire dragon, it will be a fatal blow to our sect. At that time, our sect will definitely suffer a great loss and fall from a first-rate sect to a third-rate force." Qinyu thought for a moment and advised, "Master, this disciple suggests that you reconsider Martial Uncle Brightsword's suggestion. Previously, there were already so many powerhouses that were slaughtered by the glazed fire dragon, and many powerhouses were scared away. However, there were still 3 groups of powerhouses that entered the abyss, including that adulterous pair. Could it be that those 3 groups of powerhouses are not afraid of death? This disciple doesn't think so. They must have discovered that there is something wrong with the glazed fire dragon, so they dared to enter." The golden-robed elder frowned. His eyes flickered with light and he was still considering. Martial Lord Brightsword continued to persuade, "Senior Brother Jean, our Azure sect has already been bullied by the other 2 forces for hundreds of years and has never had a chance to turn things around. As the saying goes, wealth comes from danger. If we enter the abyss and are lucky enough to obtain the glazed fire dragon, everything will be solved." You're tuning in to the Zhou Xian's Legacy YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.